right. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Unfiltered Truth. I am one of your hosts, Eric Smith, as always, joined by my co-host and partner in crime, James Shook. And we're lucky enough today to have two distinguished guests on our show. Just introduce them real quick and then get to our sponsors, and then we'll get with it. First up top to above me to our left, you got Joseph Gullett. He is the current Georgia State House representative from District 19. In Georgia, so thank you for joining us. He's also the former president of Paulding County Public Safety Appreciation. He has a degree in computer science in Columbus State. Is that right?
That's right. Yep.
And then next to him, we have Jerry Sheeran. Jerry is a graduate of Auburn University. He has a degree in public administration. He is also the former Paulding County Commission chairman and currently is serving on the Georgia Department of Transportation in District 14. And he's also a successful business owner, started 8 businesses throughout his life. So we appreciate you all joining us.
Happy to be here.
All right, so we'll jump to some sponsor slots real quick. We're going to start out with All Weather Construction. If you guys have any construction needs, renovation, home improvement, give Steven a call over at All Weather Construction. That's going to be scrolling at the bottom of your screen there. That's 470-519-6988. Again, that's 470-519-6988. Again, give Steven and the guys a call over there for any of your home improvement or renovation needs. And then moving right along, we've got Peach State Printing. Peach State Printing's been a one of our long-going sponsors of the show. We've had a lot of charitable donations, and recently, if you guys will check out our new logo at the top right corner of your screen, you'll see this was created by Peach State Printing and Jason and the guys over there. So they pretty much do everything under the sun, screen printing, stationery, office printing, vehicle wraps, you name it. They pretty much do everything. So check those guys out. That's 770-439-0335. Again, that's 770-439-0335. And then also moving right along to North Cobb Spine and Nerve. If you guys have any chiropractic or physical medicine needs, check out the ladies up at North Cobb Spine and Nerve. That's in Ackworth, Georgia, at the corner of Mars Hill and Highway 41. That is northcobbspine.com. So if you guys have any aches and pains, give them a shout out. And other than that, let's jump to it.
So kind of how we came to this, we had the election night special, and obviously we all know the election right now has been called for Joe Biden, but there's some other issues and stuff going on. And Jerry's kind of been one of my go-to people who I've gone to for advice. Hey, what do you think is happening right now? What's happening with the election? How is it going? And he's been extremely accurate in everything he's been telling me throughout the up until this point. And he brought up a scenario to me the other night that is a possible, we don't want to call it probable or put a percentage behind it, but it's basically a tie that could pop up once certain things happen. And Jerry, if you could just kind of get into that for us.
Yeah, so there is a numerical equation that works for a tie, and it's not a great possibility, but it's not 0 or 1 or 10% either. It's probably greater than 10%, less than 30%. But right now, I'm looking at the map online, and I literally do an hourly update to all the numbers for the states of Pennsylvania, Arizona, Georgia, Nevada, Michigan, North Carolina, Alaska, and Wisconsin. The Trump campaign has been since election night, when Fox News and several other outlets called Arizona that they were going to win Arizona. I believe that first night, Fox had them down by something in the neighborhood of 88,000 votes. And the Trump campaign has said, no, our internals are right, you're wrong. We're going to win Arizona. And here's how we're going to do it. And here's what we have to get the percentages to win it. So I've actually followed Arizona pretty closely, and the Trump campaign has been spot on in their numbers. It's been pretty amazing. Going back to one of my first notes about this, which was the day after the election, Wednesday, in Arizona, the Trump campaign was down by over 68,000 votes. It whittled down, and the last time I checked, which was a few minutes ago, in Arizona, they are down 12,813 votes with at least 1% out. Okay. So Arizona is critical. I mean, there's almost no mathematical equation for Trump to get there without Arizona. Following the trend, the Trump campaign said they'd win by 10,000. According to my numbers, they'll win by just a skosh over 8,000 in Arizona. Following the trend, unless the trend just stops or if they stop counting. But under any scenario to be president, you just about have to have Arizona.
Sure.
Any scenario to be president, you've got to win the Pennsylvania lawsuits. I'll give you kind of a quick thumb on the Pennsylvania lawsuits. I don't know all the things they're suing about, but and I guess James, you might have just heard Giuliani's press conference. I didn't, but one of the things that they're suing about, which gives us the most opportunity to win, is that the governor of Pennsylvania chose on his own to change Pennsylvania election law and allow ballots received after Tuesday night in Pennsylvania to be counted. And the Pennsylvania legislature had previous to that said, you're setting the date, and the date is Tuesday night. It was a drop dead date. Ballot received after Tuesday night, according to the Pennsylvania legislature, shouldn't be counted. If you go back to that, Trump wins Pennsylvania. You get those 20 electoral votes off Biden, put them on Trump. You give him Arizona as his team thinks he's going to get, and now all of a sudden you have an entirely different ballgame.
Right.
I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
No. It's just said you're right. Yeah, keep going.
Okay. So, and I'm just going to back up and give you the reason why Pennsylvania may go our way in a loss in the court. The Constitution is extremely clear that state legislatures get to set the way votes are counted in their state, not the federal government, not a governor, not a judge. The Constitution is exactly, completely, 100% specific, and it's part of the election clause in the Constitution. And in fact, when they argue cases before the Supreme Court, almost every time a constitutional issue comes up, the attorneys for whatever side will argue, they will use something called the Federalist Papers, which were a group of papers submitted by Alexander Hamilton, James Madison, and John Jay to convince people in the 1700s to adopt the U.S. Constitution. They put these papers in newspapers all across the country. And actually, the Federalist Papers in papers 59 to 61 specifically talk about this. And they specifically say, here's what we're going to do. It says the times, places, and manners of holding elections for senators and representatives and also for presidents shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof.
Gotcha.
So you go, here's your map. You go from here to the Constitution, and the Supreme Court's got to make a decision whether they want to overrule something that is specifically mentioned in the Constitution.
Gotcha.
I don't know if they will or not. I mean, I don't know. They've made some crazy decisions in the past. But if we get that ruling, we get Pennsylvania, and now all of a sudden we're sitting there with Trump at 263.
Yep.
Now we're going to get to the scenario that I talked to you about the other day.
Yep.
Nevada is a horse race. Right
Yeah,
now,
100%.
right now, 97.8% of the votes are in, and Nevada has got all kinds of election issues. Those Nevada electors are 6. You add the 6 to the 263, you get to Trump's magic number, which is 269. See, they keep saying you got to have 270, but you don't. The Democrats have to have 270. Trump wins in a tie. Because a tie goes to the U.S. House of Representatives. And in a quirk of the U.S. Constitution, they said when the House of Representatives decides a tie in an election for the President of the United States, each state gets a vote.
So explain why a lot of people would say the House of Representatives being in control right now of the Democrats is a bad thing for Trump. So if you could kind of break down that, because they do have a majority right now in people, but explain why a Trump win is possible with this scenario.
Okay. So each state gets one vote. So what happens is, for instance, Georgia, we have 9 Republicans and 5 Democrats representing our state in the U.S. House of Representatives. So Georgia's vote goes 1 vote for Georgia. It's not 9 to 5. It's 1. Each state gets 1 vote. That's it. It's very, very, very specific in the Constitution. There's no room for debate. There's no argument. And we control, I believe it's 27 states. I believe 27 states have more Republican congressional members than Democrats. Now, I don't know if this scenario will happen. I would love for it to happen because as I told you, Eric, nothing would be more perfect in my life, and I could die a happy man to watch Nancy Pelosi have to crown Donald J. Trump president.
I think a lot of us would enjoy that for sure. And it's something that it's feasible. And if you hear everything about the out-of-state resident voting thing that's going on in Nevada, and I'm about to kick it to you, Joseph, here in a second, to kind of hit on Georgia, and then we'll get back to the whole scenario. Yeah, that's a possibility in Nevada because there's so much fraud that appears to be coming out of Nevada right now just with the out-of-state voting stuff. So, yeah, that's good to hear that. James, what you got?
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously Nevada is something that's somewhat of a train wreck right now, I think you said earlier. But, there's a couple of scenarios. They're looking at what they call, I guess they call it a validated or a verified recount now in Georgia. I think it was announced a little earlier today that is actually something that's going to happen.
Yep.
So I know the Trump campaign is going to be, they're obviously going to favor themselves in that race, I believe. But then again, if you listen to the Trump campaign, they're favoring themselves in all 6 of those battleground states. So
Sure.
So we've discussed here what we need. Trump needs to get Pennsylvania's 20 electoral votes, I think is what Jerry was saying. And then we also have Nevada was falling in there. Was Alaska in that count for 269?
I think they called Alaska for Trump today. Can you verify that, Joseph?
Yeah, I don't know if they did or not. I'm not sure.
Gotcha.
Oh, they did. I'm looking over here now on Real Time Live presidential electors, and they've got Alaska with Trump.
Okay.
Now, there are many other scenarios. There are other paths to get to 260 to greater than 269 for Trump, and they seem to feel really good about this ballot harvesting and all these laws that they've got. So many people signed affidavits in Michigan. The problem in Michigan is there's 146, 137 vote difference.
That's a lot.
That's a lot.
Yeah.
And they think they've got a good shot here, but Joseph would know better than I if they can pick up 12,813 votes as of 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, and that's a great segue. So, Joseph, why are we doing a hand recount here versus using, I believe we do use the Dominion software here. And don't let me know. But why are we doing a hand recount versus using the software? What's the reasoning?
So it actually does use the software. So a hand recount is just rescanning all the ballots. So when you put your paper into the ballot machine, so the ballot marking device marks your paper, and then you submit it into the scanner that scans it. When you scan it, it takes a picture of the ballot, and then it drops it into the drop box. So what they're doing is they're going to rescan by hand all of those ballots again to see what the new, if there's any changes, to the election count. Before they do that, I think they actually have to do called a risk leveling audit, and basically that's something we're going to continue to improve upon here in Georgia. Colorado's got a pretty good risk leveling audit statute in their state, but basically it's looking for any irregularities from the counts. So this is one, as the machines that the ballot marking devices had the same total. If you total all those up as the actual ballots that were submitted, are there any irregularities? Are there more ballots that were printed or more ballots in the machine than actually the ballot marking devices, printed out? Those types of things happen first, and then they'll do the recount. I think in Paulding County, the recount will take about 5 days, and the risk leveling audit take 2 or 3 days. So we're into next week for Paulding County. We're a larger county, but we're not the largest. We're not Fulton and DeKalb and Gwinnett, which they're still actually counting their regular ballots, and so I can't imagine how long it's going to take for them to do the actual recount there. But we are using the machines for the recount.
Okay, that's great because there were some people that's like, oh, I can't believe we're doing a hand recount, so that answers that. So is there going to be any type of supervising body that's going to be watching these recounts? Is there any additional call it protections in place where people are supervising, or what's the
there are things called poll observers, and there's like in Paulding County, I know that there's a number of organizations who are all about fair elections who will be here monitoring that. And so it is monitored. There's not so in Georgia, every county is the one responsible for the election. And so the state's not in charge of the election. Secretary of State is the chief elections officer, but each county is responsible for their own election. So there will be watchdogs, I guess you'd say, from the Republican Party, Democrat Party, and a number of these organizations, the Carter Center, a number that are watching this happen and trying to look for irregularities that may occur.
Gotcha. So
but the state will be monitoring too, but the reality is each county is responsible.
So then I have a question here. When you have a situation like they're talking about in Detroit, up in Michigan, where there is speculation that there may be some computer editing going on with this. And I don't want to jump too far down that rabbit hole just yet, as far as throwing a bunch of, theories out there about that. Right. But let's say that there was, let's say that the computer system changes votes. Are we using the same computer system to rescan the hand votes again? Could the same fraud happen again with those, or is this done a different way?
No, it's Dominion is the vendor. I don't know if it's the exact same machines that are used in Michigan. The same vendor, and it's actually Dominion's used in like 30-something states. So what happened in Michigan? I'm not super familiar with it, but I don't believe it's like it's just a bug across the entire scenario. It's something specific to them, either done specifically in that state. For sometimes they think they're doing good and they actually cause a problem. So, but it is the same software used in multiple states. It's the same vendor, but I don't think we have the same issue. We haven't found the same issue here yet.
Gotcha. So to kind of, and I'm going to let Jerry answer the question that's up there, so I'm sure you would know this as well. So that would kind of help take out the theories, like when people said there's been thumb drives and these kind of things found with all these extra votes on them. This would take that stuff out of play to where at this point you're going to make sure that the ballots match up with the exact amount of votes, correct? Is basically what you're saying. That's
exactly right. Yeah. So a ballot only counts, if it's actually scanned. There's no really ballots on thumb drives. That's not really a reasonable thing. What happens is there's a card in each of those machines. Each of those machines, that card, same with the previous machines too. There's a card in each of those, but that card gets taken to the main hub of the county, and then those are brought down into the machine. But it's not a thumb drive or anything like that. It's really just the counts of that machine, and then there's a paper backup, and on top of the paper backup, there's, like I said, every time you enter your paper in, it scans it. So there's a digital backup too. So if you were in there and you removed 15 pieces of paper, the images of the initial scan are there as well. So there's a balance of all of those pieces together.
What is a situation, or could you explain a situation where on a recount a ballot would be thrown out? Because there's a lot of, I know in the media right now, there's, especially from Trump's campaign, they're talking about, well, these votes will get thrown out because of this reason or that reason. And even outside of courts, throwing ballots out because of maybe the time frame or whatnot.
Right.
I keep hearing a lot about on a recount, there's a certain amount of votes that will get tossed no matter what because of discrepancies or this or that. What is an example of something that would be in a normal situation would be tossed on a recount? How would that process go about?
Yeah, I'm not super familiar with that. I'm not sure how on a recount something gets tossed. There are a number of provisional ballots. And then also during the audit, when there's audits, if you see irregularities and they actually look at the signatures of maybe absentee ballots and they don't match, there may be I think they're also looking at doing that from a check, and those could be thrown out. But I don't know how on a recount when you're scanning things that things could be thrown out. I don't see that being a possibility.
Sure. So we got a question from Facebook. Jerry, I'm going to kick this one to you because I'm pretty sure you know this. If not, we'll kick it over to Joseph. So Helen says, I'm still unsure when my vote was put in the scanner, is it counted at that point? So when you go to the polling place, and like we all saw this year, you take, your piece of paper, however you scan it in, is the vote counted at that point?
That's probably a better question for Joseph because he used to be on our election board here too. So
I did. Yeah. So it is. So there's each machine has like I said, that little card. When you scan it, that vote is then put onto that card. And then at the end of the night, when the machines are closed and locked down, then that card is taken to the central office where all of the votes are combined into what the totals are. So, yes, when you put it in there, your vote is then counted at that point on that machine. And then it goes and with other cards and gets the total populated vote counts happen then at the night. So
Gotcha.
that's a lot of why you see in most counties, you'll see the absentee by mail come in first. That's usually the first vote count you get. And then later in the night, you'll see a absentee in person, meaning you voted early, come in next because those are the cards that they have. So absentee by mail, they actually are scanning at the time. Absentee by early absentee, they're new cards, additional scanners that come in. You don't reuse the same machines. Those cards get scanned in, and then the last piece would be the day of as the different precincts close down and bring it to the central office. Those are then counted. So that's usually the order that you receive them.
So it seems like and I could be remembering this incorrectly, but I don't remember doing this procedure the last time I voted. This year was the first time I took a printed piece of paper from the machine over to another machine. Right. Is that accurate? That this is the first year they started doing that?
Yeah. So in Paulding County, that is true. In Paulding County last year during the municipal elections, we did it. We were a pilot program. In 2019, we passed a new law in order to change the ballot machines. We had something called they actually it was all stuck on a card on each machine, and you had to tabulate every card. This is really called a ballot marking device, is what we passed. And the state bought a whole bunch of machines for all the counties. The reason we did that was, one, the machines that we had were pretty old, and they outused their service life. And two, people want to have a physical. They want to, for a recount specifically like this, they want to have a physical ballot you can go scan. In previous world, in the previous machines, we wouldn't actually had ballots to rescan. We had to rescan all those cards, but this time you actually had the true ballot that was scanned in, that you can do a recount on. So newer technology is kind of becoming more mainstream. This is no different than if you bubbled it in.
New Year still good, Jay?
Accurately
I'm
for
here.
you.
Joseph's breaking up.
Yeah, just a little bit.
All right, hang on. Joseph broke up for a minute. So I've got him muted till we get his stuff back. There we go. So Jerry, let's go back to Pennsylvania real quick. We were talking about that. Those kind of initial conversations we had. How you had to put a percentage? Explain to everybody why Pennsylvania is still in play.
Well, because the governor of Pennsylvania unilaterally chose to change election law without having the legislature involved in it. He changed it, and he said, because of COVID, I want to be able to accept ballots that are received after Tuesday night. And the legislature wasn't in session to object to him. So the Constitution is very clear. The governor could have called a special session of their legislature and said, "What do you want to do?" Well, the problem is the governor's Democrat and the legislature's Republican. So he didn't call a special session. He just did it on his own. The Republicans took him to court, and they went to the Pennsylvania Supreme Court, who basically said, "We understand what the U.S. Constitution says, but these are special circumstances." So the Republicans failed right here and then to appeal this thing farther up the line. But, we can't go back to August and fix that.
Right.
Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court can fix it. And in a way, it will be a shame if they do. And here's why. Now, we win, which is good. I'm an unabashed Republican. And so I'm happy that we win. But had the governor done this right, or had the legislature come in session, they would have made sure everybody got their vote in. And the people that did vote late because they thought, I can be lazy, I don't care, I'll vote Tuesday by absentee and mail it in, as long as it gets there by Friday, I'm good. And it's a shame. I don't want anyone's ballot to not count myself, but I want every ballot to be legal. So we have a good chance to win on this. One of the things I told y'all that I think most of the other states are problematic, but I had a personal experience here in Georgia My daughter went off to college. She went to Auburn, and she left here in 09. And she graduated in Auburn in 13, and then worked for 2 years in Auburn, and then moved to Utah. In Utah in 2016, she voted in all the elections. 2 years later, in 2018, she and her husband moved to North Carolina, where she just recently voted in North Carolina. My daughter received an absentee ballot at my house this summer in Georgia, for Georgia.
And why was that done?
Well, I guess I guess the Secretary of State's mass ballot mail-outs are the reason. And my wife and I were talking the other day, and we're very certain that we remember getting another one for the general.
Yep.
Now, in my life, I go to the mailbox and I get the mail. And when I'm walking back to my house, I stop at the garbage can and throw everything away that's worthless, which pretty much means I throw away my mom's mail because she passed in 2018. And I still get her mail at my house, and my daughter's mail because she doesn't live here anymore. But my wife, Kathy, thinks that we actually brought that ballot in the house and opened it. I'm not going to be honest with you. I can't tell you I remember what happened in September or October. I do remember definitely getting one in the summer. I do remember that. So I checked with our local registrar, and she says, yes, Laura is still a registered voter in Georgia. So I fixed that. But my point is this. How many were there 12,813 other college students who moved away and didn't move back to Georgia and who aren't voting in Georgia and who got absentee ballots mailed to their house and someone at their house may have voted for them?
Right. I think it's feasible.
You can't prove that fraud. That's an unprovable fraud. But it's something to think about. We better fix this problem or else we're going to lose every election from here on out.
Yep, and to your point, Jerry, I told you this when we talked on the phone. I've recently moved to Cherokee County from Paulding, and I actually received at my Cherokee County address a Paulding County absentee ballot vote and I believe it's for the primaries. I don't remember getting one for the general, but I'm 100% that I got one for the primaries. And I did the same as you. I was like, well, what should I do with this? I shredded it because I didn't really think much about it because obviously I wasn't going to mail it in because I had no intentions to do anything shady. I was going to wait and vote in person like I usually do. And yeah, I've heard it. And then we have another one of our, state reps, his deceased grandfather voted in this election. So, I mean, the fraud is there. So, and I think anybody at this point that says there's been no fraud is just, they're not being realistic, I guess is the best way to put it.
Well, at this moment at 2:56 p.m. on a week and 1 day after the election, there might have been 12,812 fraudulent votes in Georgia. And so Biden's still the winner. You see what I'm saying? I'm not saying there's enough out to make a difference, but a reasonable person would say in a state with 4 million voters, I guess, let's see if I've got that number up. In a state with a little over 5 million voters, 4,991,865 have voted so far, have cast their ballots and been counted. 1% is out. It wouldn't be unreasonable to say there's going to be 10 or 12, 15,000 ballots that shouldn't have been cast legally. So
correct.
You just prove it. That's the problem.
100%. I think that's where we're going to run into the problem. That's what you and I talked about. How are we going to prove this? Do we think the election's over? Even if there is fraud, how are we going to prove it? And again, that's one thing I asked Joseph when he can get his connection straightened out. That's a big deal.
Well, I mean, and the administration right now seems to be pretty confident that they have some amazing, blow your mind away news release that's going to happen in the next week or two. It's going to reveal this insane amount of. I mean, if you listen to them talk, they're talking that there's no question it's absolutely impossible he can lose. They've got some means of doing something. I guess my other question would be this. I mean, what would be the standard or what is the protocol as far as hiring people to deal with the elections? I mean, it seems like this would be a pretty stringent, I mean, obviously there's consequences to tampering with ballots and things like that. I mean, is this discussed up front with people that are hired for these positions? Is this something where we're trying to vet honest people to deal with elections, or are we just bringing any old Joe off the street and letting them count ballots?
Well, now in my former, I'll put my commission chairman hat back on. Let me, guys, it is very hard to get those poll workers. It is. I can't tell you how hard it is to find people that will work basically 3 weeks a year to every other year. It's usually senior citizens, usually people that maybe they're disabled in some way, but hey, they're good citizens. You know what I mean? They're civic-minded people. And the truth of the matter is, I honestly think in our state that it's that's running that department. It is, in Paulding County, Deidre Holden does a phenomenal job. And, she is fantastic, and she watches everything. So I don't know if that's true in the counties where there has always been rumors of rampant voter fraud in those counties. I mean, everyone knows them. They're Fulton, DeKalb, Clayton, Gwinnett now, DeKalb, and then Chatham counties have got a bad reputation. And these are just what I've heard. I don't know. I mean, I've never seen any fraud because I don't go there. I mean, I'm familiar with voter fraud. Okay. I've always said there's always voter fraud. Every election has some voter fraud, some.
Well, I'm glad
100%.
he said that. That was my next question. So we can pretty much assume that every election always has fraud.
Yeah. Fraud.
I mean, if one dead person gets to vote, there's fraud, right?
Exactly right. If one dead person gets to vote, there's fraud. I mean, that's just what it is.
Yep.
So, I've been involved in every election cycle since 1976, every 2 years, in some way or another, helping candidates, running myself, being involved from the government side. There's always anecdotal evidence. There's always rumors of this, and these things are happening, but they don't usually happen enough to influence an election.
Sure.
Congressman Gingrich said to a friend of mine, the person who runs the best campaign usually. So sometimes they have to overcome fraud, but generally that's what happens.
Well, that would be absolutely the opposite in this case this year. I would imagine the person who ran the best campaign absolutely has not won up until this point. And I think that's a fairly obvious statement. That's not hard to concede on the left as well.
I guess from the left, they would say, no, he ran a perfect campaign. He stayed in the basement.
Yeah, hide your candidates. They can't screw it up.
Sure. So, hey, Joseph, we were bringing up while you were gone. I kind of want you to hit on it since it's right in your wheelhouse too. So James was asking about, we're going to hit this question too, knock that one down, and then we'll get to it. So James was asking about, are poll workers vetted? How are poll workers determined? So what would somebody that has a problem in the way this election's gone, with there being, allegations of fraud, that wants to contribute to maybe being part of the solution? What would you tell them as the answer to that in their individual counties, whether it be, in Georgia, or, well, use Georgia since that's where you're at, but here in Georgia, what can people do to help out?
A few things. One, they're always looking for poll workers, especially with COVID. Majority of the poll workers are older, and COVID, hit that population a little bit harder than other populations. And so they lost, especially Fulton and Cobb and DeKalb, they lost a lot of people who had a lot of experience, and they were really hurting for poll workers. You really saw that in the primary, which was right in the middle of COVID, and the people who just weren't worth going out. So if you're able to work the polls, they'll train you. You get paid to do it, and you can be part of the process to making sure that there's a fair election, that you do your job, and you can also learn a lot about the process. Poll observers as well. So if you're interested and you have a cause for you, whether it's just a fair election, or if you're a Republican or Democrat, want to make sure that things are done fairly, poll observers are always allowed. Every campaign is always looking for them, every election, presidential campaigns, and also a lot of nonprofits are looking for them too, to say, hey, let us know if there's any irregularities. Here's a number to call with attorneys, whatever you see that looks wrong, and then they'll vet it. So that's a great way to get involved as well, in order to help the elections and keep them secure. The more eyes, the better, right? So
100%.
Whether you want to work the polls, which is a great way to do it, or just be an observer, is also a great way to do it.
Sure. And then one of the other questions I guess I want to hit on too, and we won't keep going, is one of the ones we talked about before. So in your opinion, well, first off, this obviously isn't the first time an election's been this long till it's been called or formalized or something like that. We looked at when the last governor's race, I think it was November 16th or so, when that race was finally called in Georgia, and Brian Kemp ultimately won, I want to say 16th or 18th. So nothing really out of character here, but in your opinion, is we'll start with Georgia first. Is Trump done in Georgia, or do you think there is a shot that during the recount he could win?
I don't know. It's such a close margin. I'm not really sure. I think there is a shot that he could win. There's also a shot that doesn't move the needle at all. The lawsuits are really going to be dependent on what they've allowed and what they uncover from a number of counties that they've seen irregularities. You hear people have said that there were, especially the absentee ballot boxes, that those were turned in and after the fact, after they were closed, that they found more ballots in those things and brought them into the fray versus keeping them separated. It really depends. There's actually a Supreme Court ruling, I think, in North Carolina that they actually redid some of the election. It really depends on what the courts say. I think it's really in their hands at this point. Usually, most of the time, recounts don't change the number that much. I do want to say one thing about calling it, though. Calling an election is not really that's a media thing. It's not a true state government, true official election thing. It's really what the media is projecting the counts to be. And so when you hear something's called, that's not official until they actually certify the elections. Georgia, I believe, has certified the elections today, and that allows the lawsuits to proceed. It's kind of like the step in the direction you go. Because we have to give, I think, 7 days or 5 business days for the overseas ballots to come in from the military after an election closes. So the county will certify, and then the state certifies them. The lawsuits then happen, and the recounts and audits happen. So is there a shot? Absolutely. Is there, but there's also a shot that doesn't move the needle. Fraud probably does happen in every election. It's just it's the nature of the beast, and how do you minimize it the most that you can. We want elections we want to feel confident in our elections and feel secure about them. So, but you also want to, people want convenience. And so, that's the balance that you have to have. Just like we all value life. You don't see us in the car, wearing a helmet and the speed limit is 25 miles an hour. There's a risk factor that you assume by just the nature of being on the road. Same thing with elections. There's a risk factor that's out there. And, how do you find the election? How do you find where the fraud happened and make sure that the people who didn't do fraud, their votes count, and the ones that did, their votes don't. So difficult balance is not as easy as it should be.
Is there a situation that exists? And maybe I don't know my U.S. history, I guess, enough for this question to be answered by myself. But is there a situation that exists at all where the United States would do a entire revote? Has anything like that happened in our history? I don't think so.
And I don't think that would happen here. So in Georgia, each county runs the elections, and each state has their own, way of divvying out the electoral college votes and stuff. The cost that's associated with an election is not cheap. And I don't think that I don't think it would matter in a number of the states that has happened. I don't think that they're saying that there's problems that there are in the battleground states. In Georgia, it could be that we do it. It could be Pennsylvania, whatever. Depends on the courts. I don't think any state's just going to say, or even has the ability to say, this election was bogus, we're going to redo it. It'd have to be a court order of some magnitude, probably coming from the Supreme Court at that point to say you have to redo the election, just because there's so much cost and how much time it would take. And it's going to have to matter. If it's 393, electoral votes to whatever the other number would be, it wouldn't make sense for a state to do it. So, that'll be interesting to watch. This is all in the courts really now, I think, at this point.
Sure. And it's kind of one theme we've always had on here. I'm glad you hit on it when you brought up the media and calling the election. One of my good friends, Lance LaRusso, who's a lawyer, and he represents police officers frequently in their shootings. He always said, one big thing that always causes these riots and all these other things to happen is the media is always trying to get it first and fast, not factual, which becomes a problem because kind of along your lines, what you're saying, they're making an educated guess of who's winning the state and kind of their opinion of who they think won or who they won the election at this point, because there's nothing official done with any of the election as we sit right here, correct?
That's right. Yeah. So it gets certified by the county first. I think they got certified today. By the counties. So that is an official step in the right direction. And then the state will certify them. Secretary of State will certify it. And then now it all goes to the recount and everything else that gets ordered. The court orders nothing can happen until the election's certified.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And that's, That's it's just crazy that the media the havoc this would cause if it does say go back to Trump is going to be. I've said it all along. You friends with me on Facebook, you've seen me say it. But I think the havoc we would see caused if this did flip back to Trump, whether legitimate or not, I'll just play both sides there.
Yeah.
It's a completely legitimate flip back to Trump, which we know the probability of that's probably low.
Right.
If that happens, I fear for the country of what's going to happen behind that.
Sure, absolutely. I mean, I think no matter what, in Georgia, I'm on a governmental affairs committee, and that's the committee that oversees the election process in the House of Representatives of the state, and the Senate has one, and that's where all the election law will come through. And I think one of the things we got to look at is when do we allow counties to release results of what the elections are? So part of the problem that we're having is, one, we don't want people to feel like can't trust the system, right? And if it flips back to Trump, half the country is going to feel like they can't trust the system. If it stays this way, half the country feels like he was frauded. So there's a no-win situation in that regard. But how do you keep things like this happening? Is one, you keep the results, until all the elections, all the votes are counted. You shouldn't release what they are necessarily. I think that's going to kill candidates like me. When I'm running for office, you want to know each stage. Hey, how am I doing? How am I doing? If I got to wait a week to hear my results, that's going to be very painful. But I think it would help eliminate some of the fraud that goes on, and also some of the just the media frenzy that happens about calling states. If we don't allow them to have the data that they use their algorithms in the the polls that happen when people are leaving the polls, we would get the media out of there, and they're the cause of a lot of the problems, I think, of just how people feel and disenfranchised with the whole system. This is the best system in the world as far as how to elect people, and our system, our government, our type of government is the best in the world. It's not perfect, but it's the best we've ever had in history. And just to continue to beat that drum that you can't trust the system. Stacey Abrams, I think, is a big part of that. That was her whole goal, is you can't trust the system. You're getting frauded, and setting that out is so just detrimental to the whole country and into the state and into voters. And ultimately, you're going to get people who don't feel like their vote doesn't count. They won't vote, and the government just is going to, continue to change, and they're going to be disenfranchised, and the outrage is going to be just like you said. Who knows what's going to happen in the streets, and it's not good.
No. So, go ahead, James.
Well, I was going to say, I think for the sake of the sanctity and the keeping the United States constitutionally in check, I don't really care what happens in the streets afterwards. I just want the election to come out to be fair, and I don't know who ultimately has control over that. Obviously we're going into courts now, more on a federal level at some point, obviously up to the Supreme Court if it has to go that far.
Right.
But I just want the election I want it to be fair, because there is no way we can have an election beyond this if fraud is proven, and they say, well, for the sanctity of everything and not causing a ruckus, let's just leave it like it is. And I actually fear that being the case. I fear that being determined by a court system where we have maybe they do prove a significant amount of fraud, and they just overlook it and say, well, we're just going to leave it this way anyway. For the sake of, because I've heard this argument actually from leftists mainly. They've actually made this argument to me about just leave the election like it is, because what you're going to do is you're going to end up destroying our election process in general. It's like, well, no, if it's frauded, it should be destroyed. So
it's destroyed already, right? We're not doing exactly.
So they're almost claiming fraud by trying to not fraud the election. That's more fraud that's a worse viewpoint on the election process than actually trying to find the fraud and fix it. So and
the reality is, I think, as someone who's been elected before, Jerry can speak to this too. You want the elections to be fair, win or lose for yourself. If I win, I want people to feel confident that I won. If I lost, I want to feel confident that I lost. But you want to feel confident that you won, because then, especially as president, you have so many people. If you feel like you're, a fraudster who's in there and not a duly elected president, then everything you do is under, you can get less done. It's already hard enough to get anything done in DC anyways, but you get less done, and that's not really fair to you if you actually won it, or it's not fair to you if you didn't win it and you're there. So you're 100% right. We have to get this right from an election standpoint, and not worry about the outcome of it, but we got to Just the reality is that I think I guess what I was trying to say was the media has driven this divide between us and this divide and this feeling like there is so much stuff going on because they want to be first and they don't have to be right. There's no accountability there. And so that's really, I think, the nemesis of where all this is coming from. It's always, is there election fraud in every election? Most likely. Does it usually matter? No. When you have a really close election, you don't want, 10 fraudsters vote to cancel out a million people's votes. And that's what can happen in this. And that's not fair. So got to get it right. And what happens after that, we have to, deal with after that, whether he won or lost, and we'll move on. So.
Yep.
Hey guys,
Jerry,
let me
go
tell
ahead.
you, part of the time is because my phone's done. So I'm down to 2% battery. Just wanted to give you a heads up.
Okay. So I guess, Jerry, we'll leave your. So I'll give you the last comment for you. That way you can get out of here and get your phone charged up for you, and then we'll finish up with Joseph. What do you see happen in your professional opinion? What do you think the next 10 days are going to look like for us? 2 weeks, just your best guess of what you see happening.
Well, if Trump loses the Pennsylvania lawsuit, that brings his path down to getting 100 and something thousand votes in Michigan thrown out, and that's just almost an impossible notion to me. If he wins the Pennsylvania lawsuit, then the Michigan votes actually could be more likely, because the Supreme Court would say, well, no, wait a minute. Not only did we have voting when we shouldn't have had voting, or votes counted when we shouldn't have, but they're going to lay out fraud in Pennsylvania simultaneous. So their lawsuits about Pennsylvania are multi-pronged. And when they make those lawsuits, I think they just about have to have Pennsylvania. I just do.
Sure.
I don't think the Supreme Court's going to say, well, we'll give you Michigan, but not Pennsylvania. Not when Pennsylvania is a constitutional question that is literally addressed in the Constitution in black and white and in letters. So, like I said, Wisconsin's still close. Wisconsin is a 20,000 vote. Georgia's 14,111 as of 15 minutes ago. So, if they can throw those votes out, 14,111 in Georgia. Arizona's 12,813. If they throw the Georgia votes out, it's a new ballgame. There's a lot going to happen before the courts in the next 10 days. That's the truth.
Right.
Gotcha. Well, Jerry, thank you. I'll let you get out of here since your phone's about to die. I don't want you to die mid-thought. So thank you for joining us, and then we'll finish up with Joseph and then get on to the next topic for the day. So again, thank you, Jerry, for joining us. We appreciate it. Thank you.
So I had a question for Joseph real quick. So getting back to this recount process where they're going to start looking at the votes, so more scrutiny, or they just get scanned, or so my impression of it is we have the sealed ballot boxes that came from the QR scanners, correct? And those are I've heard somebody mention something about a seal that's on the like it's sealed until they break it to do a recount.
That's right. That's correct.
Okay. So if that is the case, and then you have all of these other provisional ballots and absentee ballots and whatnot, with the absentee and provisionals, those are not scanned through the tabulator, or those are manually counted?
So the absentees are scanned in the tabulator. They're scanned by the elections board. In Paulding County, it was the elections board. We opened them up whenever a judge said we could. Usually, like a big election like this, we started opening them up, I think, a week early, maybe because you got to get all those envelopes out so you can actually scan them. And then provisionals are not scanned, though. Provisionals are usually hand marked ballots, and a provisional means that the poll didn't believe that you were eligible to vote for whatever reason it was, but you believe that you are eligible to vote, whether you had the wrong precinct or whether you'd already voted or whatever it is. And so you're saying, I want a provisional ballot, meaning you vote, and then you'll work out the problems later. So the elections board will go through, and if you say that the poll worker told me I was at the wrong polling place, the elections board will look at that and say you were at the right polling place, your vote counts, or you'll bring you in there. You basically have like a little mini trial of you explain your reasoning on why you voted, why you believe you were able to vote, and then so those votes are sometimes counted and sometimes thrown out. Most of the time, most of the time the people are wrong. In my experience, I'm not saying that's, globally, but in my experience, most of the time the person was at the wrong polling place, or they voted and they forgot, they try to vote again, things like that. So, but that just gives you an opportunity to make your case and actually get your vote to count if it should.
Okay, so I'm going to go into the hypotheticals now.
Sure.
I tried to stay away from. If we had, let's say, in some cases there was indications, or at least there was accusations that maybe there was an enormous amount of mail-in votes that didn't reach the correct person. Someone else fills them out, sends them back in. On those mail-in votes, are those QR scanned? I mean, so if a poll worker saw these, they don't go into the tabulator as well?
No, they go in. So they come in and first they come to the elections office. I can only speak to Paulding County. I think pretty much all of them are the same though, but they come in the elections office and you would look at the signatures. So it's a signature match. That's one of the first indicators. Does a person no longer, like a neighbor of mine, he actually passed away in a car wreck a few weeks before. So before the absentees were sent out, but theoretically he still got an absentee ballot because he was over 65. Those types of things should be looked at. Like I said, each county runs their own elections office and they kind of do it differently, but those are the things that should be, the obituary should be looked at. Is this person deceased? Those things are looked at by the county, and that'll be revisited again, especially with the lawsuits. That'll be really focused on, do the signatures match? Was the person deceased? Is that a valid address? Those types of things goes through it. That's just a long process, and that's usually what America doesn't have patience for, typically. So we just had to make sure that's why the courts are really involved. Fulton County has trouble every time. We have to figure that out. I think from absentee ballot standpoint, we have to figure out driver's licenses. For an absentee ballot, you don't necessarily have to have a driver's license to get your absentee ballot. If I go to the poll, I got to show my driver's license to prove who I am. That's a good policy. It needs to be good policy for the absentees as well. So we got to figure, those are things that we're going to look at. I think the speaker just appointed the Government Affairs Committee to look into and investigate this last election. If any one of your viewers actually have, saw any frauds, saw anything that concerns them with their experience, or know someone who did, please have them contact either me at my house account. I can give that to Eric to publish here, or the committee, but that's things that we need to know so we can, one, we're working to make sure this election is valid, but we're also working to what laws do we need to change to make sure the future, we don't go through this again. And that's really the key from here.
Yeah. So I don't really remember exactly how I registered to vote. I mean, I know I'm a registered voter. I did vote in the last several elections. I don't remember. It's so far back. I don't remember how I became a voter on a registration. I couldn't imagine that they would think that my signatures got on I think I used my shorthand signature when I voted the other day.
That's an argument. Yeah. That's an argument that's,
because I didn't know how specific that was. I mean, I didn't ever read anywhere they said, hey, when you sign this, it better look exactly like the way you sign your ballots, or you sign the acceptance sheet to get your ballot.
What'll happen is if a signature doesn't match, they're supposed to. And I know Paulding County did this when I was on the elections board. We'll send you a letter, say, hey, you got a problem with your absentee that you mailed in. Can you come to the office?
Yeah. And we'll figure it out. This would be on my in-person vote. So on in-person voting, it doesn't matter. There's no signature.
Because you show ID.
That's because you show your ID. That's right.
Because you show ID. Okay. So when they go back and they're reviewing these ballots inside the tabulated box now.
Right.
They're going to pull those out and manually count those. And there's no way they're going to go through those and go, oh, this one's not valid because it's not signed, because there is no signature on those.
That's right. Yeah. No, okay. all of the ones, even the ones that were mailing, those were scanned in. So those will also be scanned in. What's going to have to happen is those envelopes. That's what you sign, was an envelope. You don't actually sign your ballot. You sign your envelope. So those envelopes will need to be matched up, and where there's irregularities, they're not going to do it holistically. It's really an audit, and there's pretty good ways to do that. Gotcha. In order to look for certain samples. Is there a problem here? Is there not a problem? Generally speaking, and go that route. That's what they'll do.
So and this will answer a question I had the other day. Somebody and I were having this conversation, and I couldn't really comprehend how it happened. So with the signature verification, are they using, like, to compare the signatures, that's off, like when you registered to vote and signed your card, they're comparing that with your voter signature. Is that correct?
And your DDS signature. Yeah, kind of all.
They do have access to that database.
They do. Yeah. Okay. DDS is one of the first validators that they have for your elections office. So elections office comes in. And that's usually how most people register to vote now.
Yep, that's how I did.
Motor voter. So when you go get your license, you actually have to opt out of registering to vote. You're automatically opted in. You have to opt out.
Nice.
So that's there's all the databases connect in that regard. There's another one too. I can't think of what it's called, but outside of DDS's driver's license database.
And for those that don't know, the Department of Driver Services database is a very secure database. It's one of those things where I personally, being law enforcement for 20 years and we had access to it as well, I just don't see there being a way for somebody to go in there and alter anybody's information. So I think if they're using that, that's one way to kind of feel, I guess, a little more secure about it. Got a question for you popping up real quick, Joseph.
Sure.
Right here, what are the chances of this making it to the Supreme Court? Noah Preston, I think he's talking about the United States Supreme Court. What do you think the chances are of that happening?
So yeah, something's going to make it to the Supreme Court. Whether it's Georgia or not, I don't know. But absolutely, I think there's as long as Supreme Court. The key would be Supreme Court actually taking it up. That's the key. But there will be some election from some state that goes to the Supreme Court. 100% confident in that.
Well, there you go.
Going on. So,
yeah. What you got?
Yeah, no, I mean that. To be honest with you, that answers probably the next three questions that I had as far as legislation. I guess I could spawn off of that to a question for Joseph here. Is the how much knowledge do you guys get of what the actual lawsuits are against your state? So let's say the Trump administration filed a ton of lawsuits here in Georgia. You guys have to get some idea of what's actually in that lawsuit so that you know what to prepare for as far as your recounts and getting this together and this information together. Do you guys have any insight on specifically what's in these lawsuits or what's being asked of the state of Georgia at this point?
So by you guys mean me as a legislator or me as So no, we don't typically. We can get that information through the Attorney General's office, but no, it's not something that's sent out saying, "Hey, here's the most recent lawsuits that they've sued." Georgia. I
didn't know if it was something that just gets handed down to where they're like, "Hey, this is our state. This is what's happening. They filed this lawsuit. We need to prepare for this."
No.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
it overwhelmed most of the people too. I think there's been so many lawsuits. I've gotten probably 3,000 emails asking me not to certify the elections. The funny thing is, we don't actually. The state legislator doesn't. Everyone from every other state believes that they know Georgia law, and I don't certify the elections. The legislatures don't certify the elections in Georgia, so I don't know. You get kind of spam. I think Dick Morris came up with that idea, and it just doesn't apply to Georgia. It might apply to other states. So
sure, and something I guess kind of want to hit on, and maybe you can hit on it real quick before we have to let you go because I know you got meetings and stuff to go to. So back when Al Gore, it was Al Gore and Bush, correct, in 2000. We went 30-something days, 39 days, something along those lines, where he was president-elect.
Yeah. And
I know it's 2020, it's 20 years later. There's a lot of people that weren't voting, much less, they're still in diapers, literally, back then, that are like, well, this would be the most fraudulent thing to happen in history. Well, it's happened before because that was the hanging Chad incident down in Florida.
Right.
So kind of let people know, I guess, what to expect, what's coming, just the patience they need to show, kind of what I mean? Does that make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I said, when people call it, you'll see in the news that, so-and-so's called or in the paper. That's nothing more than media talk. States have to certify the elections. In Georgia, we're supposed to certify today. That will allow a recount. That will allow an audit, and that will allow lawsuits to proceed. So this is going to be this is not a quick, 1 week we're going to be done and know anything. I don't think it's going to be a while before we know anything in Georgia. It'll be even longer before we know anything in, the other states, I think, especially, like I said, Fulton County, when we do a recount, that's recounting every single ballot. Fulton County is still counting ballots from election night. That was a week ago. Imagine having to redo that. And on top of that, Georgia's got we have 2 elections coming up. We have a state runoff and we have a federal runoff. Those are on different dates. And I think Secretary Raffensperger just today announced that he was going to merge those two, basically pushing out our December state runoff until the January federal runoff. But theoretically, those elections offices are having to do getting ready for the state runoff, getting ready for the federal runoff. So it's got to send out absentee ballots to all those people. And at the same time doing an audit, and at the same time doing a recount, and at the same time doing, if they're Fulton County, still finishing up the ballots. And so There's a lot going on, and if you're Fulton County, I won't pick on them because they're just problematic every single time. There are other ones that are problematic. They're one of the biggest, so they get a little leeway, but to consistently be bad, they're just not very well organized. I would say they don't learn from their mistakes, and they continue to get into them, and they continue to be in the news about it and don't seem to care. But I mean, they're going to have a lot of trouble making these dates and actually getting a recount in any time soon. So do exude some patience. I think most of the people are trying hard. Not every county is working. Not every county is working smart.
Right.
They're all working hard. So, give it a little bit of time, but it's just where we are in the process right now.
Can you explain for us any knowledge that you have on ballot curing for at least our viewers? What is ballot curing? And then once a ballot has been cured by someone that's handling, like by a counter or someone that's receiving the ballots, is that cured ballot, is that indicated somehow? And is it indicated back to who actually did any editing on it?
So I'm not familiar with ballot curing at all, so I'm not sure what you're talking about.
Okay. See, what's crazy, because the media is harping on this whole thing with ballot curing, and they're like, "Oh, this is what you need to know." This is the first time I ever heard that phrase.
Well, and I think I understand it based. I mean, it's a pretty telling the way that the way it's described with the word that they use is curing.
Right.
It's from from the way that the Nevada election of representative laid it out a couple days ago, maybe on Monday. He stated at some point the ballots that are being cured, whether they had this discrepancy or that discrepancy, and the poll worker had to fix things on it that, it looks like they didn't get the circle colored in all the way. And we did, like, who does that poll worker, I guess is what my question was that, were they associated with that ballot now? If there is some kind of further discrepancy on a recount or anything like that.
Right.
To me, that just seems like a super shady process. That almost seems like it would be directly against ballot tampering laws, just right from the get-go. Either the ballot's done correctly or it's not. And I think it's made pretty clear to the voter that they should have their ballots done correctly. And if they're not, it just won't be counted. And then some states have now employed this. Well, we're going to just fix it for them the way we kind of think it looks like what they were trying to do.
Does that too. Georgia. So if you submit an absentee ballot, and that's you do that by hand. So that's why we did ballot marking devices, so that we don't worry about people coloring out outside the lines or doing whatever they're doing. We do that in Georgia. Paulding County does that. Every county does it. So if there's a ballot that comes in absentee and you scan it and it fails for whatever reason, I marked 2 people in one race. It would come back and say, this is not a valid ballot. So there's a representative from the Republican side, a representative from the Democrat side. If there's a third party, they can be there too. But basically, it's a committee of people that then get the ballot, and they have to decide, what was this person trying to do? And a lot of times and then they have to refill out the entire ballot. So you fill it out, and then there's another committee that validates all the other things were valid. So when I was on the elections board, we'd have someone, I remember specifically, they had Trump bubbled in, and then they had marked out Trump, and they put Pence in the right-in. So what was that person trying to do? Were they trying to vote for Trump? Did they decide not to vote for Trump and they wanted Pence to be president? Or were they just, voting for Trump, but they wanted everyone to know they were really voting for Pence as VP? What were that person trying to do? Ultimately, we couldn't decide. So that person's vote for president didn't count. But what you don't want is all the other votes down ticket, or wherever the problem is, to not count as well. That person's one vote on that list invalidated. You don't want to invalidate all their votes. And so
Gotcha.
That's what we do here in Georgia, and specifically Paulding County. You have multiple committees to validate, make sure that, one, what's the person thinking? Can you decide? Fill it out correctly for them. Especially older people, sometimes they have a little shaky or something, and they go outside the lines, and those machines don't like that too much. So sometimes, most of the time, it's easy to determine what happened. And then sometimes even the mail, it's tore. We got some torn ballots in before, so probably the mail did that through those machines, and you redo their ballots for them. So that does happen here, but it absolutely should not happen where a poll worker is helping someone vote, or someone at the Board of Elections is helping someone. That's a clear violation of, I think, every ethical thing. Not even law, but it's just ethically not allowed. And I haven't heard that happening in Georgia. It probably has. I'm not sure. I mean, sometimes someone in need of help, you're going to want your natural inclination is to help them, but that shouldn't be happening as far as voting, especially helping them decide. Well, you didn't know someone. I know someone for this one. Go ahead and mark this. I don't think that's happened often here, but we do fill out ballots or do allow a committee to fill out ballots and then another committee validate them. So it goes through multiple processes.
So I'll leave Joseph out of this, being a representative and whatnot, just for whatever liability reasons. But then, so I'll discuss this with you then, Eric, directly. Yep. That seems to me where the fraud comes into play right there, because if you have situations where they're talking about in Michigan, Pennsylvania, a couple other places where they're kicking the poll watchers out, they're covering up windows so nobody can see. Like, what are you doing back there? And most of this is happening during these mail-in ballot situations where they're trying to cure ballots, or they're claiming that basically what they're doing now is they're claiming that every video that somebody has is just normal ballot, what they call curing, and correcting these ballots so that they can get these people's vote cast. But if this is done where we don't have overwatchers from both sides, I mean, there's a complete gateway for fraud right there, I think. Right. I couldn't imagine. And obviously, that's probably what the lawsuits are about, I would imagine, in Pennsylvania and Michigan.
And in Georgia, there's a lawsuit about that. Fulton County kicked them out and said that there was a water leak. They were going to count any more ballots. And they still ran it for 2 more hours after that, after they didn't have any poll watchers in there. That did happen. There's a lawsuit. Georgia Republican Party sued. I'm not sure who else has sued, but that's a lawsuit pending in Georgia today for that. That, like I said, because there's a problem. It's a double-edged sword. Counties run elections, and they are the ones responsible for the elections of their people. And this, the closer you are to the people, the more the better you're going to be. But there's also people who just don't have the ethical, they just don't have the right skill set to be in that job.
I'll say,
and I think that's a law we got to figure out too, is how do we remove these? If counties won't take care of their own, and this is vital to the entire state. Ultimately, what Fulton County did ultimately affects me if they change votes and change the president's choice, or, or if they've caused so much concern for someone's vote that people don't feel like their votes, are counted correctly, or there's, fraudulent, then that affects me here in Paulding County, and we got to figure that out. How do you allow that to be done? And can Florida recently, or not recently, I think Rick Scott had a bill. Maybe he didn't even do a bill, but he basically got some people in Miami. Florida used to always be in the news about problems with their elections, and the governor down there fired the elections officials in those counties, and things got cleaned up. And is that something we need to do in Georgia? I don't know. That's something we'll look at, I'm sure.
Well, sure, and I think it speaks volumes to at least process in Paulding County. A lot of your constituents are watching. Preston's actually one that lives in your district, so it should speak volumes to everybody, at least in Paulding County, that they are doing the right thing out there. It's no secret Paulding County is a Republican stronghold. It's a very pro-Trump county, always has been. But even with all that said, there was a vote that somebody easily could have said, "Hey, this is going to go to Trump," and they took the time and used reason and said, "You know what? Just because we're not sure, we're not going to let it go to Trump." It didn't go to anybody else, but there wasn't just an automatic, "Hey, this is where it's going." So kudos to you and everybody else in Paulding County making sure everything's on the up and up. But I know you personally, and I know you have a strong moral compass, and you're always going to do the right thing, along with anybody else you surround yourself with. Unfortunately, that doesn't exist throughout the country, and that's what we're relying on as people, as our elected officials and volunteers, to have a strong moral compass. Even though they may hate the person, thing we heard about the other day, hate the sin, not the sinner, kind of a thing. That's where you hope that they do that, and they may despise Trump, but you know what? If it's supposed to go his way, we, as having honest elections, we need it to go his way, or then, vice versa to Biden. If there's something that's supposed to go to him that needs to go to him, I may not like it. I don't agree with him. Didn't vote for him. That's obvious. But if he won, he won, and that's where I kind of stand.
Well, if we can't have an honest election, then they should just shred the Constitution. That might be the even more important thing. Although it's extremely protected and very specific in the Constitution, the election process itself. If there's wide scale fraud and judges turn their back to it and let it happen anyway, I don't know how that can be combated in the future, and I don't see. I would see wide scale fraud going forward. I mean, you're setting courtroom precedents for allowing this. And I know a lot of it's been allowed along the way, or we wouldn't have gotten to the point that we're at now. So Maybe
all
it's
about convenience.
maybe it's accumulated over the years, and now it's getting to a boiling point, and hopefully something can be done about it if there is true, especially wide scale fraud.
Yeah, 100% agree. Convenience. People want convenience. They expect convenience. They don't want to have to wait in lines to vote. So you continue to have the longer voting periods, which gives, I think all of those things have eroded, the opportunity to really lock down elections and feeling safe about them.
Yeah.
We want people to have the ability to vote, but if it was up to some people, we'd have year-round voting for the November election. It just would be incredible, and that's things we got to figure out. We don't have an excuse for absentee ballots in Georgia. Some states do, some states don't. You can vote for any reason absentee. It's just a lot of things culminated to this. The Secretary of State sent out ballot applications, and I think that's a big concern. I want to just talk about really, really fast.
Please do.
Talk about receiving their a lot of people they know received an absentee ballot and that they didn't ask for. I hope that didn't happen. I don't know of many places that actually happened. You actually got a ballot or an application?
No, I got the ballot for it, and I shredded it. Jerry and I talked about it for Paulding County, even though I was in Cherokee.
Yeah,
I received an absentee ballot, not the application, the actual ballot at my house in Canton, Georgia, even though I haven't lived in Paulding County since February of this year.
Wow.
I registered, and I got my driver's license done 10 days after I moved to Cherokee. So it's not like I waited until, the election or right up on there. So there's no reason they should have sent me a Paulding County ballot to Canton anyways, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, well, it's all about your permanent address. So they could do that if you live there for, your kids in college or something like that. That can happen.
Okay.
But I mean, you're one of the first, I guess, I've actually heard. A lot of people got applications, and so that's the problem. First, we send applications during the primary for everyone, and that caused a lot of angst and concern about people, especially people if you moved to your house a year ago and the previous owners are now getting applications for absentee ballots. Man, this makes me not feel secure about our elections, or things are going wrong. And that's problematic too. But that kind of set a precedent down the line. And absentee ballots are the hardest for elections offices to deal with. When we were there, that takes the longest because you can't do them until the polls close. And if you have, theoretically, if say half the people vote early and half the people vote on election day, you have, you've spread that half the election day vote over the course of, 12 hours.
Right.
Then you have half the election at one location that you have to do. And you did it over multiple locations. You have one location scanning these things in. And it's problematic, especially when you're getting the millions. I think this last election, we had 4 million, absentees and 1 million not, or something like that. So that's, you got 4 times as many things you got to scan at one location after the polls close. And that's where the problems lie. So hopefully if you need to report that, send that to our committee too. Hey, you received an absentee, you actually received an absentee ballot at your house. You didn't request it.
Sure.
That's the problem. We got to figure that out.
Well, and then I want you to see this too. I don't know if you saw this one originally posted on Facebook a while back. I actually know David. I've coached baseball against him in Paulding County. I'm not sure if he's in your.
I know David.
Area.
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you saw his thing, but he requested absentee ballots. They left to Minnesota. He had some medical issues to get taken care of. They never received them or mailed them in, but they went to vote, and the system said they had already voted in person. They had to nullify their ballot and to be able to vote. That's something that I know and personally that happened.
Yeah.
It's not some random chain on Facebook. He's a real person. He's a baseball coach. I know him.
Yeah.
So this actually happened.
Yeah,
so,
we need to get that. I need to talk to him too. I hadn't read that yet. So all those stories we have to figure out. And those are things that, one, from the legislative side, we're trying to figure out so we prevent it in the future. From the court side, those are things that they need to know so they can decide how much, how many problems do we have and what really happened. So it's kind of twofold there. We're more looking back at history, looking back to what can we change in the future, and everything else is kind of in progress. Unless we have a special session, there's nothing we're going to do legislatively until we start back in January.
Sure. I guess you've been great to stay with us over an hour, and like I said, I knew you have to go to a meeting. So I kind of want to just leave you, let you say, last comments, anything you want to say, just kind of leave everybody with, not just your voters, but everybody else that's watching this, because we have people from all the way from Oregon for sure, all the way over here, and actually have a couple out of the country that watch. So just kind of leave the last word with you, and then me and James will break down the gun control stuff.
Sure. First thing, thank you for watching this, and if you're overseas or you're in another part of the country, we'd love to have you visit Georgia. It's a great state. That's number one. We'd love to have you, visit and do some tourism. Take some of your tax dollars would be great. Number two, although I hate taxes, but at least we're getting it from you and not from our constituents, right?
True.
But be patient. This election has been troublesome. It's there's a lot of angst out there. I have the same angst. I'm just I want my vote to count. I want my family's vote to count. I want your vote to count. How do we get that to happen? And how do we feel secure in the votes that we cast? And so from a legislative side, we're working on it. We have an investigative committee from the government affairs and the House side that I serve on. We have a Senate has an investigative committee they just assigned to look at these things. If we're called to the special session, there's two ways to do that in Georgia. There's the governor can call us into special session, and or 2/3 of the legislators can call, or actually 3/5 of the legislators can call us into session. So if we all get together, we don't have 3/5. Democrats aren't going to want to go back in and change anything. No. We look at this until session happens. So governor had to call us back in, but if they do that, then we'll do our best to make sure one, that the elections are fair, and two, that we figure out a way to make sure that elections are fair for the runoff election coming up as well. Not that we're trying to do anything other than make sure they're fair. We're not trying to side with Trump or side with Biden. Let's just make sure whoever voted, that their vote counts, and they feel very confident that it counted.
I think that's key for democracy. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, that's really it. If I can help you in any way, my email, I'll give it real fast. It's joseph.gullett, Gullett at house.ga.gov. Again, joseph.gullett at house.ga.gov. If I can help you in any way, whether you're a constituent of mine or not, I will do my best to help you. And if I can't, hopefully I can get you someone who can. And, I appreciate being on the show. It's been a lot of fun. And Eric, I appreciate you. We started on PPSA together, known you for a long time. And I'm sorry you moved to Canton, but I'm happy for you too. I know it's a good opportunity for you. So.
Oh, absolutely, brother. Dan, thank you for everything you do for not only Paulding County. You lived there a lot of years. You do a lot of good. You got the right heart. I know a lot of people give politicians a hard time, but you're definitely one of the good guys. I don't say that because you're Republican, but, thank you for your service to Paulding County and to the state. Anybody that takes time out and actually serves for the right reasons, I think any of us appreciate that. So thank you.
Yeah, happy to be here, and I appreciate that very much. You guys have a great rest of your afternoon. I'm gonna probably stick around and watch your gun, because I'm curious. I got a gun bill I'm working on, so I'd be curious how Biden's for.
Okay. Oh, well, we're about to break it down. The first screen I'm going to show you will make you laugh. So anyways, I'll let you get off. That way we can speak a little more our mind, because any of our further opinions beyond this do not reflect.
I don't want to be mine. That's right. Yeah, no.
Exactly. So anything that did not come out of his mouth is not his opinion. I want to clarify that now. So it's in video. We're good. So again, thank you, Joseph.
Yeah. Hopefully everybody hung out long enough to get the disclaimer after everything was said.
That's right. Well, we got it now, so we're good. Thank y'all.
Thanks, Joseph. I appreciate it.
All right, man. Take care.
All right, brother. All right, James. So what'd you think, man?
So the election's a mess. Maybe it'll get fixed. And when I say fixed, I mean maybe if there's fraud, the fraud will be discovered. Obviously we're going to move into Second Amendment stuff here, and I think that's going to be a big topic. Should these two birds end up in the White House?
Yep. So we're kind of resetting real quick to give us a sec. So yeah, this could be interesting. So something interesting I didn't want to bring up with Joseph on there, because I saw it. I actually kind of heard rumblings about it today. So Joe Biden's relaunched his campaign. He's actually seeking donations. I'm not going to say necessarily his campaign. He's relaunching his campaign for a legal defense fund purposes. Mm-hmm. He's requesting donations to fight Trump, just like Trump would have, other foot. And Trump is actually on the campaign trail, from what I understand. So there's that. I think it's kind of interesting. Even Biden knows it's not done. I think after talking to Jerry and to Joseph, I think the American people kind of need to, on both sides, take a step back. Don't be shooting off fireworks in the air yet. Same thing, if states suddenly swing towards Trump, and he is now the projected winner, it could very much come down to the Supreme Court. So I would tell all your supporters on both sides, just simmer down just a bit, be patient, and take your time. But let's break down what's going to happen if what Biden wants to happen for gun control. So it's going to be interesting. So let's break it down. There's a couple things that I read the other day I thought were very interesting. It does say right here, gun violence is a public health epidemic. Almost 40,000 people die as a result of firearms injuries every year in the United States, and many more are wounded. Some of these deaths are injuries of mass shootings that make national headlines. Again, mass shootings are a very small percentage of gun violence. Anybody that knows that, or anybody that follows the stats knows that. So just go back and research it. He actually makes a point later on down here that we care more about migratory birds than we do our own children, because only 3 rounds are allowed in shotguns to hunt migratory birds. So I want to get your thoughts on that while I'm scrolling down a little bit more.
Well, I mean, they're still trying to argue the Second Amendment from the wrong perspective. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting, and it had nothing to do with making sure that we kept households, in the early era of the United States way, where the father takes the kids out and teaches them how to shoot the gun so they can go hunt for meat. The Second Amendment has absolutely zero to do with hunting. I don't think it's mentioned whatsoever in it.
Yep.
So, yeah, I mean, if they want to make the argument from we hear this a lot. I think it's a big talking point that he's used several times, as far as you don't need 30 rounds to go hunt a deer, and if you do, you suck at hunting or whatever. The Second Amendment has nothing to do with hunting. The Second Amendment is about keeping a militia so that we can keep our Constitution in check. I mean, so it's the Second Amendment's 100% about tyranny, and just to put a very simple kind of view out on what the Second Amendment is. So if we start from the point of view about hunting being the primary use for the Second Amendment, then yes, then a lot of people can make arguments that we don't need this, we don't need that. But let's go back and let's flip the switch on that and say, well, if we look at what the Constitution actually was written for in relation to the Second Amendment, now we have many reasons to be careful how much overreaching legislation gets tossed at the Second Amendment.
Sure. So one of the things that, I really just find kind of interesting, that they highlight here is holding gun manufacturers accountable. I think we could probably do a whole hour on just this statement.
Mm-hmm.
So 2005, Senator Biden voted against Protection of Lawful Commerce Arms Act. Basically what they're wanting to do is people being able, if their child is shot with a Ruger gun, that they want to be able to sue Ruger for their child getting shot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, here's the problem.
Displacing responsibility. But
of course. Well, do we sue Seagrams for a DUI death when somebody drank some Seagrams that night, or are we suing Bacardi if somebody got really drunk on some rum and killed a whole family? No. With any choice we make, and this is part of what I guess our belief system is versus other parties' belief systems to a point, is personal accountability. You just said it. It's a huge deal. This is something that it basically takes the responsibility of the shooter off the shooter. And to me, it's just it's crazy that anybody even thinks that way.
No, it absolutely. I mean, we live in an era where personal responsibility is going out the window, and it seems to be, decreasing daily. I mean, what do we, let me give an example of something that would be legitimate legislation.
Sure.
Okay. You're driving in your car, and your airbag deploys all of a sudden unexpectedly when it's not supposed to. It hits you, knocks you out, or causes you to have a wreck and you die, or you get maimed, or you just have a wreck and you're injured, or it injures someone else. Absolutely, they're going to have a lawsuit that goes to the manufacturer of the vehicle or the airbag or whatever, however that trickles down. And that is something that should probably happen, and they should be responsible for something like that, because they're putting a product out that says it's supposed to function one way and it's not functioning properly. Now, you're trying to look at holding legislation against, let's say, in this case, a gun manufacturer. The gun performed correctly. It absolutely performed to a T the way that the manufacturer said it would perform. The only thing that you could say that it did or didn't perform with was the user of the gun and who was the person performing that. Now, again, this would put the responsibility back on the perpetrator in this case. And I don't know why it seems to be a big progressive push to take responsibility off of criminals. I mean, I truly don't understand this.
No, I don't either.
But that seems to be the push. I mean, that seems to be the popular thing, or at least that's what they broadcast is the popular thing. And through broadcasting that over and over and over and over, it will eventually become the popular viewpoint that, decrease in responsibility on the criminals. Yep. So, yes, your car malfunctions, sue the manufacturer for it because it malfunctioned in some way. You get drunk and drive it into oncoming traffic. No one's suing GM for that. And they should not be allowed to sue GM for that. That has nothing to do with GM selling you the vehicle. Now, what GM could do and what the car manufacturers in those cases could do is they could say, well, if I'm the CEO of this company or I'm the people on the board of these major companies, if they start passing legislation like this, guess what? We'll just shut down. We won't make any more cars. We'll get all of our friends and all of our big billionaire buddies that own all these car manufacturers, and we'll shut them all down, and nobody will have cars anymore.
Well,
I mean, they could do that actually, and they could live their lives very successfully on after that.
well, and I think that's go ahead.
But that's not going to happen. I mean, obviously, we know that's not going to happen. So,
well, I think ultimately that's what the I'm not going to say Democrats, the anti-gun people or the gun control people want would be for a gun manufacturer. Like, well, if we're going to keep getting sued and taxed, and we're getting that real quick in a second.
And I don't know any Republicans that are anti-gun. I've never really heard of it actually. If there's a group out there that's Republicans against guns, I'd love to hear it. Somebody throw that in the comments and link it to us because we'll check it out right now to verify it. But no, I mean, gun manufacturers should not be held responsible for anything that happens to their gun. And we've already seen this has already actually happened with Bushmaster and Wyndham and Remington. So,
Sure. And this is part that's near and dear to me because of, my history and my training and stuff that I've done. So this next statement on the plan against a very long plan, so we may go another hour on this, just so stick with us. Get the weapons of wars off our streets. The ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines that Biden, along with Senator Feinstein, secured in 1994, reduced the lethality of mass shootings, but they had to have a 10-year sunset provision, which we all know about 2004. Bush did not extend them because he believed in the Second Amendment, and that did not get extended. Well, James, there's a problem with that statement. A couple of them. One, let's talk about the most famous, I still think it's the most famous mass shooting or active shooter in America ever, and that was Columbine. For those that don't know, Columbine happened on April 29th, 1999. Look at my date, April 20th, 1999. But James, they had anti-gun laws, anti-high-capacity magazines, but they used high-capacity magazines and guns, and so why?
That can't be true, Eric. Are you sure you read that?
I don't know, man. I could be completely wrong, but they used.
But it was illegal for them to do that.
Yeah, the law should have stopped them, but it didn't. And that's just the fact, folks, that I really wish everybody would understand. Tech 9 was one of the guns used. Tech 9, for those that don't know, it does come in semi-automatic, automatic. I believe this one was automatic. I believe they did have, I know they had a high-capacity magazine. They were high school students, and depending on the laws in Colorado at the time, they probably couldn't even own guns, period. So there's that. Yeah. So also, something I can tell you statistically, and I'll provide those after the podcast so I can be sure I get them 100% right before I quote them, is assault rifles or weapons of war, which we're going to get to that statement here in a second, are very rarely used in active shooter situations. They're not used. AR-15s are not used in every active shooter situation. Most of the times it's handguns. We've seen shotguns used, as in Columbine, you had both. But a lot of times, like the Virginia Tech shooting was a handgun, where I
think rifles are only used as far as either murders or shootings go. I think rifles are only used in like 7%, or it's some low number.
Yep, and then
something low, maybe lower than that.
Right, and then let's get to this, to the weapons of war thing. All right, folks. We can't use that gun as an example. So a normal AR-15, right? A gun that I can buy or you can buy. We can go to your local gun store when we're actually in stock, and go buy them. I would be willing to bet that there's been exactly 0 of those over in Iraq because they don't use AR-15s over in Iraq. They typically use M16s or M4s that are semi-automatic and fully automatic platforms. You cannot buy one of those as a civilian without going through a very arduous process to go get one of those. It's the National Firearms Act that they want to expand, and we're going to talk about more in a second. Weapons of war are not legally allowed on our streets, folks.
So this is wordplay right here.
Sure.
All right, so let's just, before we go further than that, I didn't mean to cut you off,
you're fine.
But we've got to stop with this assault weapons thing, because assault weapons, as defined, assault weapons are not AR-15s. But it's been more common, and again, we're seeing what I just said a moment ago. If you say it enough, it'll become the popular thing, and people will start to believe it, and then they'll start to repeat it, and then they'll start to live it. And that is exactly what's happening with assault weapons, or the name assault weapon. Is an AR-15 is not an assault weapon. It's not an assault rifle. It's a semi-automatic 22 caliber rifle. Let's see. What was the other? Weapons of war. Okay, weapons of war. The last time I saw somebody with grenades and mortars and shoulder-fired missiles, RPGs, things like that, I never seen those on the streets. That seems to be what they use in war quite a bit. So guys, this all boils down to wordplay. And if you're not versed in weapons and you have no idea about, number one, why the Second Amendment exists, number two, what the Second Amendment is protecting, and then number three, what are these weapons that we are trying to keep? I'll put it to you this way, because this has been stated before. If the citizens believe that they're going to protect themselves from government tyranny, then they better have, and they said this was an official, I don't remember, it was a Democrat official at some point. Was it even Biden that may have said this? He said they better have F-15s and F-16s and fighter jets and things, and missiles and things like that. Okay, I'm glad he said that, because the Second Amendment is written in case of tyranny so that the public could hold weapons similar to the military's weapons, so that there would at least be a fighting chance of not getting to a point where you're completely overtaken by a rogue or tyrannical government. So it's a contradiction in himself to say that we would need fighter jets. I agree with him. I agree with him. Yeah, let's absolutely do that too. And then in the very next statement, they say, well, basically, this is what they're boiling it down to. You wouldn't stand a chance anyway if we decide to do something. So you may as well just give us all your weapons and not have any form of chance against us. And that, guys, is a very telling statement. And he outlines this. This is a Joe Biden website.
Yeah, no,
right?
this is Joe Biden's official website.
Okay. Yeah, they outline this right here. Everyone needs to go read this. And if it doesn't scare you, and maybe they made it so long so that people wouldn't read it. Guys, this is big stuff right here. This is stuff that you will only know it affects you, especially if you're not into weapons and guns. You will only know if this affects you when it's too late.
Yep. So that's, freaking argument you hear is, oh, the Second Amendment wasn't written, it was written when we had muskets. Well, that's because the government had muskets too.
Absolutely.
And that's why it was written. It was written, and I do agree with you that 100% it was written to have similar to or equal, so you don't end up in a Nazi Germany situation.
Lopsided, event.
Right. Or end up like the Chinese are right now. And I have, friends that watch this, that they have relatives that are Chinese, and actually one of them has a spouse that's Chinese, and she's super scared of what's going on right now.
Mm-hmm.
I've got many Cuban friends that are scared because they see the writing on the wall with this. So anyways, let's get back into breaking this down a little bit more. We can kind of jump. We've got the whole statement about ducks and migratory birds, and that people who own guns care less about kids and more about ducks, which is completely not true. All right, let's talk about the National Firearms Act. It's also known as NFA. Currently, National Firearms Act requires individuals possessing machine guns. So there's a weapon of war if you want to get to it. We can say machine guns a weapon of war.
And let's explain machine guns. We can hold the trigger and we can expend the magazine at its full capacity until it's all been expelled.
Sure. A semi-automatic AR-15, you have to pull the trigger, and every time you squeeze your finger, the gun goes bang. Or every time you squeeze the trigger, the gun goes bang.
So it's 1 round per trigger pull, very similar to exactly like a handgun.
And so, right. And he says possession of machine guns, silencers. Silencers don't exist, for those of y'all that know it. They're actually suppressors. Does not silence the sound. It suppresses the sound. The proper terminology through the ATF is actually suppressor, not silencer. So they should probably check whoever wrote this. Short barrel rifles, also known as SBRs. You have to go under a background check and register those weapons with the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, which is the ATF. Here's the thing. Guess what, folks? If you buy a gun at a store, and yes, I know private sales, you don't have to do a background check. I get it. But if you go to a store, you do a background check. And guess who runs the background check? The ATF. That's what they do. But what do they do with the NFA Act? Well, okay, suppressor makes a gun no more dangerous or no less dangerous than it was before. It's just a little quieter. It's called hearing protection. That's why they're great to have.
There's actually bills and legislation right now that's been put forth to try to it's a hearing protection act. Correct?
Yes. And then you have short barreled rifles, which those are no more, definitely, they're less lethal, in my opinion, than a gun that's a 16 or an 18-inch or longer barrel gun because you lose a lot of velocity and things like that. Yes, you can move them around, get in and out of a car better with them, and they are better to carry, in my opinion. But again, they're not really concerned with safety because they're still here, and they still allowed all this stuff back then under the NFA. Yeah. But what did you have to do? You had to pay the government a tax.
You have to register it, yeah.
And you had to pay
they're saying you still can't. So if you're really concerned about safety, you wouldn't even have the NFA registration, right? I mean, so they're obviously admitting there's no benefit to the public being safer by not having these weapons right here, right?
Correct.
And at the end of the day, again, we're going back to lack of personal responsibility or the attempt to get rid of. Personal responsibility.
Next statement. This is one that should be really concerning to people where they're going to try to tax your guns out of your hands. Buy back the assault weapons and high-capacity magazines already in our communities. Biden will also institute a program to buy back weapons of war currently in our streets. Good
You
luck.
can't buy back something you didn't sell us.
Right, exactly. This will give individuals who now possess assault weapons or high-capacity magazines two options: sell the weapons to the government or register them under the National Firearms Act. Well, let's talk about a hypothetical person I know that just ordered 50 AR, 15, 30-round magazines. Under the current thing, if they're going to tax it per item, which is what they're trying to do, that person would have to pay $10,000 in taxes.
Yeah, for their just for the magazines.
Yes, 200 times 50, $10,000 in taxes just to possess the magazines. Again, they're just trying to tax the guns out of your hands because they know they can't legislate it out of our hands. All right, this is my favorite right here. There's going to be a lot of husbands out here that will probably agree with Biden on this one, and here's why. So Biden wants to make it illegal to buy any more guns a month than one. Well, I would love to buy 12 guns a year. So that's cool. I'm good with this. I mean, I don't think I've ever bought 12 guns.
Reduce stockpiling of weapons. In order to reduce the stockpiling of firearms, now, why do they want to reduce someone stockpiling fire? I mean, is there some plan that I don't know about? Is there some surprise attack that's going to happen? This is very specifically written against law-abiding citizens. This isn't for criminals.
Right.
They're not mentioning anything that's criminal in here about this. They're
going to create criminals.
Reduce stockpiling of weapons. In order to reduce the stockpiling of weapons or stockpiling of firearms, Biden supports legislation restricting the number of firearms an individual may purchase per month to one. And I bet that legislation doesn't stop there. I bet there's a cap on that somewhere, and you're just not going to see it yet.
All right, here's my next favorite one. Keep guns out of dangerous hands. Federal background check system, national, whatever. The background check is one of the best tools we have to prevent gun violence. I won't disagree with that, but it's only effective when it's used. Biden will enact universal background check legislation and close other loopholes that allow people. It should be prohibited from purchasing firearms from making those purchases. So let's get into what he's going to say before we get into what the background checks do. I'll let you read this one, James.
Okay. Require background check. We're going to do this in two parts. Okay. Yep. Require background check for all gun sales. Today, an estimated 1 in 5 firearms are sold or transferred without a background check. Now, what they're trying to say is that private sales are outselling retailers. Yep. That is absolutely absurd to think that that's the case. Crazy. I absolutely do not believe that because a lot of gun people don't like selling their guns. They like keeping them.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, we had this discussion a moment ago about this weapon behind me right here.
Yep.
So 1 in 5 firearms today, an estimated 1 in 5 firearms are sold or transferred without a background check. So we're going to have to find some statistics on store sales versus what they believe the estimated private sales are. There's no way. It has to be the opposite of this. It's got to be 5-1 in favor of store sales versus private sales. Now, they use the word loophole. That's a real catchy word right there, loophole. Okay, there's no loophole, right? There's just law written as it is. And the law written as it is in the state of Georgia, if I sell Eric one of my personal guns, we don't have to go to a background check. Nope. Now, if I were to sell it to someone that I don't really know in Georgia, I might have them meet me at an FFL and do a background check and do an actual transfer over to them, which is really not a big deal. But let's go to the background check part right here. Because all store sales do require a background check or a previous thorough background check for a concealed or a weapons carry permit.
Correct. So, and to hit one of your loophole things. So here's my favorite. Here's a blatant lie in writing. Okay, this is a lie, and I can 100% say this. This will close the so-called gun show and online sales loophole. Okay, gun shows, yes, you do not have to have a background. They're correct. Here's where the lie is. Online sales loophole. Yeah. That's false. There's no loophole. That is absolute falsity. It's just to stir up people to make it think that I can go right now to buyBigGuns.com and get a 50 caliber, freaking gun sent to my house and start shooting tanks with it. No, you have to have that gun sent to an FFL, and then you have to go through a background check to get said gun. You cannot just go on and buy a gun online without a background check. That's just a lie.
So let's break that down into more layman's terms for the folks that aren't as gun savvy. If you purchase a weapon online, if you do go to an online gun store and you buy a weapon, it's going to ask you before you complete the sale, before you're allowed to purchase it, where that gun is going to be shipped to local to you in your area to another gun store. or to a pawn shop where they sell guns and they have the ability to run the background checks. This is absolutely it's a lie. It's an absurd statement that they made right there to going to stop the online sales loophole.
Doesn't exist.
So you purchase a gun online, the gun gets sent to a local gun store to you, in which case you go and you provide them with your license or your carry permit if you were already previously vetted. But in most cases, you'll provide them with your driver's license. They are going to have the ATF and FBI run a background check on you at that point, and you will not get your weapon from them, even though you've already paid for it. You will not get that weapon from them until that background check comes back clean.
Yep. And then here's the thing I think is interesting to get back on the political stuff real quick. He said that the Obama-Biden administration narrowed this loophole, but it cannot be fully closed by executive action alone. What does that mean? That means that we have to maintain control of the Senate to be sure that this stuff does not get enacted. Biden's telling you right now that he can't do it by himself. He has to have the House and Senate on the side to be able to pass this. Ultimately, I think the Supreme Court overturns it anyways, but we could go on another show on that. So something to think about when the next voting thing comes up. This is something, the boyfriend loophole, I never heard of it until I read it on here, but let's cover it. They're going to close the boyfriend loophole. It's written here of what this is. In 2016, the Obama-Biden administration finalized a rule to make sure Social Security Administration sends a background check system records that it holds of individuals who are prohibited from purchasing or possessing firearms because they've been adjudicated by SSA as unable to manage affairs for mental reasons. But one of the first actions Donald Trump took as president was to reverse this rule. President Biden will enact legislation to codify this policy.
Well, that's because they didn't have it. They had, yes. Well, what it was is, I mean, you could have anyone try to commit you and say that you shouldn't have guns in your possession because you're mentally disabled. I mean, so this just comes down to, I mean, that is so subjective right there. That's going to come down to someone's personal opinion. And if they think you should have a gun or not, and who are we giving that authority to be God in that situation? So eventually what that leads to is no one's allowed to have a gun. You guys mark my word on that one if that ever happens.
All right, so let's talk about hate crime loophole. On its face, this seems like a good idea, but I'm going to tell you why it's not. Biden will enact legislation preventing an individual who's been convicted of a misdemeanor hate crime or received enhanced sentence for a misdemeanor because of hate or bias in his commission from purchasing and possessing a firearm. I would say you need to make the hate crime a felony for one, so that way you have a convicted felon and go from there, because we don't need to.
And the standard on convicting him for that should be enhanced as well to where you have to prove that the guy committed a felony at this point.
Right, sure, and I agree. And I know we do have a law in Georgia where if you're convicted of domestic violence and misdemeanor, you can't own a gun. And I get it. I get the reason behind it. I'm not saying it's a bad idea. I'm not going to disagree with everything he's saying. The hate crime loophole, okay. Probably on its face, not bad, but let's make it a felony. Hate crime should be a felony anyways. I don't know of a state that has a misdemeanor hate crime law. If you do, please let us know. Charleston loophole, again, something else I've never heard of before I started reading. I'll let you read this, James, since I read up on it already. Go ahead.
Let's see. This is the Charleston loophole. Yeah. Okay, yeah. So this one's classic. You guys are going to love this, especially you gun guys. The Charleston loophole allows people to complete a firearms purchase if their background check is not completed within 3 business days. Biden supports the proposal in the Enhanced Background Checks Act of 2019, which extends the timeline from 3 to 10 business days. Biden will also direct the Federal Bureau of Investigations to put on his desk within the first 100 days of presidency a report detailing the cases in which background checks are not completed within 10 business days and steps the federal government can take to reduce or eliminate this occurrence. Now, what they're saying here to simplify that is if you go in to get a background check and you try to buy a gun and the FBI does not get, or the background check with ATF does not come back within 3 days, have they already pushed it in 2019 to 10 days now?
No, it's still 3 days.
So all right. So if it hasn't come back within then, the retailer can elect to sell you the weapon at that point.
Correct.
And they're trying to move it to 10 days. And then they're also trying to get the FBI to send them a list of everyone that this may have happened with. Right.
Which is interesting considering the FBI doesn't keep track of that. It's the ATF.
Absolutely. And then, okay. So here's the other thing about that. Most gun stores that you're going to go into have a policy that they're on store policy that they're not going to be responsible for selling you the gun if this background check does not come back timely. I don't think I know of an instance where somebody's went to like Academy Sports or Walmart or something like that, tried to purchase a gun and their background check didn't come back in 3 days and Walmart said, well, go ahead and come on up here and get it. Yeah. I think the stores themselves actually have their own policies against that. I mean, I see what he's trying to do here. But basically, what this is saying is that if you have an FBI that's not very, or an ATF or FBI that's not very efficient at something, and they're dropping the ball for whatever reason, it could be because they're overwhelmed, they're understaffed. There's many reasons that could be, that you're just not going to be able to purchase that gun ever if they don't come back with your background check. And there's a whole list of concerns with that.
So I want to hit Christian's question real quick so I can address it so you can go back and watch it if you want. Didn't know they even sold guns online. A lot of people don't know that. If we're going to go talk about the election again, probably not this episode. If you go back, Joseph does kind of hit towards the end about why they're going back in Fulton County and why there's going to be some recounts and stuff. They do know it was fake. He didn't come right out and say it was fake, but they said it was. And then, yeah.
And then they continued to count votes for at least 2 hours, they say, after they sent the watch overlookers away.
Right. And so, Christian, go back, check that out. If you find the link to that story, please drop it in here and I'll post it for everybody to see the link. So here's my favorite hypocrisy of the Democratic Party. And Trump said this during his campaign, okay? Trump has tried to be more of a champion for people that were convicted of crimes, trying to give them chances. He's got Prison Reform Act, some other stuff that he did enact, okay? And these are people that are convicted he was trying to help out. Here's some hypocrisy that is written down by the current president-elect, that, to me, he's not about justice. And you have a DA that's in on this that's not about justice. Close the fugitive from justice loophole created by the Trump administration. Because of actions by the Trump administrations, records of almost 500,000 fugitives from justice who were prohibited from purchasing firearms were deleted from the background check information system. The Biden administration will restore these records and enact legislation to make clear that people facing arrest warrants are prohibited from owning or possessing firearms. Well, here's why I have a problem with it. Again, on its face.
Yeah, because you haven't been convicted of a crime.
Right. On its face, do we want a fugitive? Everybody thinks a fugitive is like a bank robber or something like that to have, a gun. No, you don't. But let's think about justice and the justice system. You are innocent until proven guilty, correct?
Absolutely.
So until you've been convicted in a higher court of law of a felony or a domestic violence crime that prevents you from owning a firearm, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to buy a firearm. Because, okay, let's say that I'm a deadbeat dad and I don't pay my child support and my ex-wife takes out a warrant for me. And now I have a warrant out for child support that I probably don't even know about, which I've seen happen. I'm saying this because this is experience in the justice system. And I can't buy a gun. Why? Yeah. That makes zero sense. You've been convicted of nothing.
Well, there's that. I mean, and then to take that a step further, I mean, we're looking at situations where there's plenty of instances where state takes over charges in certain situations. Domestic violence is one of those, right? So if a husband and wife are getting into some kind of altercation or whatnot, and it becomes physical to some degree, and one of them calls law enforcement, it can be, it's not always the case, because a lot of times law enforcement officers will try their best to decipher what's going on, but it would be available to them to do so, to just take, let's say, I'll use the reverse. Let's say the man calls on the lady, right? Because she's like smacking him around with a pan or something in the kitchen. And he said, and when the officer gets there and just takes the man's word straight for it, it looks like there was some kind of assault here. We're going to arrest her. And now she is sitting under state's charges, waiting to go to court. They might become fine with each other next week after they got down from their drunken stupor or something like that. It doesn't matter. She's not purchasing a firearm anymore.
That's crazy.
And that's just absolutely silly. I mean, that those laws have to take into consideration not just the most extreme instance, because they try to ride them and they sell it to the public as if we're stopping people from, this guy is just repeatedly, he's a fugitive from the law. He robbed a bank and then he beat some lady up on the way out of the bank. And, we're stopping him from being able to buy a gun while he's waiting to go to court. Nope. That is not the case. More times than not, that is going to be the minimal of those cases, and you're going to see that happen in general public in daily life.
Sure, imagine having a warrant for a traffic ticket.
Yeah,
a warrant for a traffic ticket. You can't get a gun because they say people that have warrants. Yeah. Well, I've seen people have warrants for a seatbelt ticket because they forgot to pay it. Yeah, and they have a warrant. So you're going to keep somebody.
Yeah, and then you're going to put them on a list where they're probably never going to get off that list as well. So
yeah, it's crazy. I'll let you hit this one, James, right here. It's really short one.
This one's
he contradicts himself.
Absolutely silly. End the online sale of firearms and ammunitions. Biden will enact legislation to prohibit all online sales of firearms, ammunition, kits, and gun parts. Okay. Again, certain gun parts, when we're talking about kits and gun parts, certain gun parts are going to be the part, mainly in rifles, it's going to be the lower receiver. That is going to be stamped with a serial number, and that is what has to be background checked for you to own it. The rest of the rifle parts do not. It's like if I changed any kind of piece of furniture, even if it was an aesthetic piece on the gun, they're saying that those cannot be sold.
Correct. Yeah,
The
you can't.
gun parts
I can't
can't,
buy a trigger online, or I cannot buy a
spring to go in it. Yeah, this
Correct.
is absolutely silly. There is no evidence that online gun sales and of ammunition, and they're just trying to make it harder for you to get a hold of it. Again, I'm trying to figure out what they're planning for here, because it sounds like they have a game plan to do something, and it seems like it's something big.
Yep. So
It's probably not good for the citizens.
here's another thing that's more along the lines. Again, they're the party of justice, right? They
Mhm.
want everybody to have justice served and not be, judged before they, have been convicted. But yet again, here's another thing, real quick. To ensure that when someone becomes newly prohibited, for example, because they commit a violent crime after relinquished possession of their firearms, again, on its face, I get it. Like if somebody holds their family hostage with a gun, like they're saying that they should have to give up their rights to own a firearm. You can, through a bonding process, the judge typically is going to put that on the bonding process anyway. Say you shall not possess any firearms until your case is adjudicated. That's perfectly legal.
But it's, how are they going to know who has fire? So this is leading to a national registry is what it's doing.
Correct.
And a national registry leads to eventual confiscation. So the only way that you could know, okay, let's break something else down for folks that may not know this and may not be into guns as well. When you purchase a firearm from an FFL, and if somebody's an FFL, they might can correct me on the timelines I'm about to give, but I'm pretty sure the last that I checked, and my father actually used to be an FFL as well. If you buy a gun from a gun dealer, the ATF does not get your paperwork that you filled out for that gun. You have a background check done, and the gun store holds the paperwork, and they are required to hold it for a certain amount of time. Should anything arise where the ATF has to do an investigation into you and somehow they gain knowledge of you having this weapon. I think a lot of people in the general public, especially new gun owners, when I speak with them, they are under the impression that when they buy a gun, the paperwork that they fill out goes to the ATF and they hold that. That is not the case. That would be a gun registry, which is something we've fought against forever. And they do not need to have a gun registry. There is no need to have a gun registry. That is not something that you want. So if that sounds like something, a good catchphrase that sounds good to you, it is not, especially if you're a gun owner. So no, they do not keep that. So there is no way that they could know who has what guns and when, other than going to, let's say that Eric committed a crime somewhere in the area and they thought that he had gotten a new weapon recently. They might go to all the FFL dealers in the area and try to start inquiring if Eric Smith purchased a gun from that store. If he did purchase a gun from that store, then they would be able to pull the paperwork from the gun seller and they would be able to see that piece of ATF paperwork. Is that correct to your best of your knowledge there? The ATF does not have a list of the guns you bought.
No,
and they never should. Do not allow that. Never vote for that.
So here's something that's a touchy subject, so we'll kind of touch lightly on this one since it does involve domestic violence, and I do think this is a problem. Statistics tell a devastating, overwhelming story. Likelihood a woman in a domestic violence situation will be killed increases by a factor of 5 if a gun is nearby. Don't agree with that, and I'll tell you why. Half of mass shootings involve an individual shooting a family member or former intimate partner. What is a mass shooting? A mass shooting is when 4 or more people are shot in one incident. You got to have a family of 4 people are shot. There you go. 86% of children killed in shootings with 4 or more victims were involved in domestic or family violence. Big solution to this is actually put people that commit domestic violence and they're convicted of it in jail and keep them in jail. And there's already, guess what? They can't have a gun. In Georgia here, the most, it was up until this election, a very Republican state. You cannot own a gun in Georgia if you have been convicted of domestic violence. You can't have one. So there's already a law in the books. I don't know what they're talking about. Domestic violence is a problem. It's tragic. Again, I'm not going to harp on that because, yes, it's bad. So, yes, we need to keep guns out of the abusers. But, again, there's already laws on the books to say once you've been convicted in a court, you can't have it. That's fine.
So, Matt, we're looking at Patriot, maybe like an expansion of the Patriot Act right here.
Exactly.
So this next one that you can go ahead and highlight it if you want to.
Sure.
There, establish a new task force on online harassment. And we don't even have to read the rest of this.
Yeah,
what they're saying is that they're going to try to cut down on extremism. In other words, they're going to do this. They're going to label anybody they see fit as an extremist, and then they're going to try to take their weapons away. or prevent them from being able to buy a gun. And that is up for so much opinion to go into that of who thinks who shouldn't have weapons or who thinks someone's picking and bullying on someone else. And it's just, there's way too much room for error there. Can't have that.
Facebook may have taken us offline, so I think that maybe we're having an issue. Let me double check. No, I'm showing some viewers. So, Christian, I'll get back to that in a minute. Thank you. Here's another one of my favorite ones. Put America on the path to ensuring that 100% of firearms sold in America are smart guns. Today, we have technology that will allow only authorized users to fire a gun. For example, existing smart gun technology requires a fingerprint match before use. That's great if you're about to get robbed or raped, and you have to get your fingerprint right on the gun for it to work so you can kill your attacker. Fantastic idea. They're not trying to bully firearms dealers, try to sell these guns. Nobody cares, dude. It's a free freaking market. If you want to make a smart gun, make a smart gun. If somebody wants to buy it, buy it. To make everybody have to do this is crazy. Coming from somebody with experience on that industry, bad juju there. That's so stupid and just beyond asinine.
Well, who's programming it into it? I mean, so they're saying that a criminal can't get that gun and program his fingerprint into it so he can use it against somebody. Again, they're only going after law-abiding citizens. They want to make it harder for law-abiding citizens to have the gun. Guys, none of these gun laws prevent criminals from doing anything. I mean, that is an absolute fact. They do not prevent criminals from doing anything like this. No. It's only restrictive on law-abiding citizens because the only people who abide by laws are law-abiding citizens. Yep. So I don't know how criminals apply to this. Okay. I think maybe some idiot a long time ago actually had a real idea that if we could get all the law-abiding citizens' guns gone, then we could eventually drop all guns around the nation, and then no one would have a gun, so therefore no one would be able to shoot each other. That is absolutely absurd, especially when we've seen cases like Fast and Furious where they're running guns in and out of Mexico and across the United States border. I mean, you're going to get weapons one way or another if you're a criminal, and you're going to do bad things with those weapons. Again, we need to go back to personal responsibility. Yep. Who's using the weapon?
Yep, this one will be easy to hit. Biden supports legislation holding adults criminally and civilly liable for directly or negligently giving a minor access to a firearm, regardless whether minor actually gains possession of the firearm. That's crazy that, okay, so somebody walks through my house and sees a gun laying out because I think it's safe because I've trained my kids on it, that not to touch my gun, that I can be criminally held liable for that. That's dumb. If they actually do gain possession of it and something does happen, there are already laws on the book called reckless conduct and some other things where you can be charged and you can absolutely be sued if your child shoots somebody else or shoots something that they shouldn't have. Again. All right. So Biden will pass legislation requiring firearms owners to store weapons safely in their homes. Okay. Well, what's their definition of safe? Some idiots who don't understand think you should never have a round in the chamber. Well, if you don't have a round in the chamber, you're carrying a brick, not a gun. So that's dumb. So no, the government shouldn't tell you what is safe.
I think it goes further than that. I mean, I know I've heard people. I don't know a lot of these people or hang out with a lot of these people, but I've heard people talk about you should have your gun in one spot and your ammunition in another locked up spot, so that you have to go to both spots and then load the gun and then get it out and try to defend your home. It's absolutely absurd.
And I think here's where me and James will probably agree with Biden on this one, so I'm not going to disagree with everything he says. Prioritize prosecution of straw purchasers. A straw purchaser buys a firearm on behalf of someone who cannot pass a background check, like a convicted felon, something like that. Biden will end these loopholes by enacting a law to make sure all straw purchases are a federal crime and ensure the U.S. Justice Department has sufficient resources to prioritize the prosecution.
Yeah, let's do it.
No issue. Let's go there. By the way, it's already a federal crime to purchase a gun like that.
Absolutely, that's already a law. So.
But I'm with it. Let's give the Department of Justice needs better resources for that. I don't think we're going to argue against that. Again, something else I don't really have a huge problem with: notify law enforcement when potential firearms purchaser fails a background check. You're kind of going to inundate law enforcement with that. I don't know that there's anything they can really. Because you're not a felon in possession of a firearm. I know there's some laws on the books attempting to buy a firearm as a convicted felon. Call us. Yeah, sure. Call law enforcement. I guess we go out to dumber stuff. So if y'all would quit, calling us for goats loose in the neighborhood and call us for this, sure, let them go out.
So, guys, I think we can summarize most of this here because this just goes on and on and on, guys. The goal here is to either get you to pay additional taxes on your weapons just for having them as law-abiding citizens, not as criminals, but as law-abiding citizens. And if they can't get you to pay additional taxes on it, then you're not allowed to have it. So then it becomes illegal. And now you're a felon, actually, under these new proposed laws and some of these, I don't know, I guess he could try to executive order some of the stuff and it get shot down eventually by the Supreme Court. But yeah, I mean, this is just gun confiscation in the works right here, guys. This is what the early stages of that looks like. And of course, you're not going to see it right now. And a lot of people are going to laugh and go, oh, they've talked about confiscating guns for forever. This is how it gets done, though, guys. It gets done incrementally, and they tighten and tighten and tighten until you don't have the ability to own or purchase firearms anymore. And if you do, you have to jump through so many different taxes and loopholes and this and that and yada, 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 just to or jump through hoops, I'm sorry, to get to be able to own a weapon. And the only person that it ends up hurting is the law-abiding citizen. This is not going to affect criminals at all. And so, like I said, we could go on and on and on with that. It's
Right.
absurd.
So this is the point I really want to make to everyone, okay, about gun violence. Okay, gun violence is a thing. I get it. Any death is tragic. I don't think any of us are going to argue that because we're not sociopaths. I want to take you back from the end of this thing to the beginning and make a point of what they're trying to use to skew statistics, to skew your mind, okay? He tells on himself right here, good for him for writing it. Biden believes any plan to address gun violence epidemic must address suicides by firearms, which account, this is important, for 6 in 10 gun-related deaths, but are more often left out of the conversation. They're actually more than 6 in 10, and I'll show you proof in a minute.
80% or something.
It's close. Yeah, many of the policies noted above, including safe storage, blah, 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 will have serious impact on efforts to reduce gun violence. There's so much more to do to support people experiencing suicidal ideation. I don't disagree with that. Our mental health system is broken here. There's stuff we could do to help people that are suicidal. I don't argue that. Months ahead, Biden will put forward a comprehensive plan to improve access to mental health services. I'll be curious to see what that is. All right. So remember when Biden tells us at the beginning of this, James, that 40,000 people are killed each year by guns. On the face, what do you take that as? Some murder, right? Like I came and shot you and you're dead. Well, if anybody's curious, I'm going to go up and show you again the proof. Okay, he says, and he does the way he words it. He didn't say murdered, so I'll give him credit. Die as a result of firearm injuries every year in the United States. So he is accounting for accidental, I'm assuming, suicide and all these other things. So out of those 40,000, and I'll show you right here on the CDC's website, so you know I'm citing something official. Let me get into it. Blah, blah, blah. Homicides, firearm homicides. All right, this is from cdc.gov. Let's go straight to this. Stop this one. Share over here. CDC, where do we go? Fast stats, here we go. All right. So this is very important to me for y'all to understand what we're talking about here. Here we go. All right, number of firearm homicides. 13,958. So what that tells us is 26,000 if his stats are right on 40,000 gun deaths per year. I'll trust him. 26,000.
27,000,
A large amount of
suicide.
Right. A large amount of our deaths are suicides. And what I will say as an officer that has dealt with this in the past, if somebody wants to commit suicide, they're going to kill themselves, bro. They're going to jump off a bridge. They're going to slit their wrist. Yes, guns are probably the easiest, cleanest way to do it. And you're going to die quick if you do it right. But to generalize that, taking guns is going to stop suicide, no, I do agree. Let's address the mental health system, get it better, and then fine. But this comprehensive gun plan is crazy, and it's just going to cause nothing but havoc.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I think that they're really counting on non-gun users voting this kind of stuff in and supporting this kind of legislation. And it's really going to take people educating others in their communities about weapons, about the Second Amendment, and really understanding why it's such an important amendment that helps protect the First Amendment, number one. But if you have a base of people that can listen to it on the surface, what they hear, their message is this: if we enact this, all these people are not going to die anymore.
Right.
That's what they're trying to broadcast to you. And it's just simply not true. Criminals are still going to kill people. It's not law-abiding citizens that are killing people. And I think that's absurd to even have to say that, but it's funny that people don't recognize it like that. They just associate guns with criminality in certain situations, and it's just not true.
Sure. So I think we kind of wrapped up all our topics. We hit them.
Yeah,
we did good. So summarize back pretty much first hour of the episode for those of y'all that catch us at the end. We had Joseph Gullett and Jerry Sheeran on. Joseph Gullett is the 19th District Georgia State House of Representatives elected official in Paulding County. He came on and talked about some of the election stuff. Jerry gave us his projections on how we think we could get to 269 and kind of what the procedure is for that. For those of y'all that don't know, again, it's not the popular vote. It is going to be decided in the House of Representatives, which is actually a good thing. To an earlier point, there's no such thing as assault weapon. Yes, you're correct. The term
Absolutely.
was created to demonize the flintlocks that the founders used were the assault weapons of the time. Yes, you're right, because utility were the best thing to have. The AR, for those of y'all that don't know, does not stand for assault rifle. It's Armalite rifle, the original manufacturer of that style of rifle in the first place. So there you go. You've been educated again. I'll just say a little bit and let James lead us with the last word. Again, thanks to our viewers. Thanks to the loyalty. This episode will be up on Podbean. When it's all done, this is our live show. So we will upload as soon as I can get back to my house and get it downloaded. I'll upload it to Podbean and it'll be up there for everybody. So please go share this. Facebook, again, has kind of banned us a little bit, so it's hard to get our names out there. James, leave with you, buddy.
All right. So we've got sponsors to talk about real quick, and then we'll let you guys out of here. All Weather Construction, guys. Contact Steven over at All Weather Construction. That's 470-519-6988. If you guys have any home improvement or renovation needs, these guys will get you taken care of. Again, that number is 470-519-6988. That is All Weather Construction. Contact Steven. Peach State Printing in Hiram, Georgia. Peach State Printing does a lot of stuff for us. They'll do promotional items, banners, office stationery, all the way up to vehicle wraps, screen printing, T-shirts, all that stuff. You guys go check Jason and the folks out over at Peach State Printing, and that's in Hiram, Georgia. But they do ship nationwide. They'll do whatever. It doesn't matter where you are. Their number is 770-439-0335, and you can catch them at peachstateprinting.com. And then we have North Cobb Spine and Nerve for all of your chiropractic and physical medicine needs. You can catch the ladies up at North Cobb Spine and Nerve. That's Ackworth, Mars Hill at Highway 41, if you guys are familiar with the area. If not, just Google them. That is northcobbspine.com. They'll get you fixed up.
Awesome. As always, thanks for joining us, and we enjoyed it. And thanks again to our guests, Joseph Gullett and Jerry Sheridan. We appreciate you enhancing the show like that. It absolutely brings a whole nother dynamic. So
yeah, and we'll keep everyone up to date as much as we can on the what's going on with this election. We'll probably be casting with a little more frequency over the next few weeks.
Yep.
And we do have everything transitioning over to Podbean, as Eric said, and we will be able to be viewed on some other platforms pretty soon, some pretty significant platforms and podcast arenas. So stay tuned for that.
Yep. Thank you.